The crack of flesh against flesh silenced the diner instantly. "Know your place, bitch," growled the hulking man with a snake tattoo coiling up his neck, towering over Emily Blackwood's slender frame. Time slowed to a crawl as the echo of the slap resonated through Crossroads Diner. Bruce Springsteen's Glory Days cut mid-verse on the jukebox. Coffee cups froze halfway to lips. 16 pairs of eyes locked on the confrontation. Emily's cheek reddened from the force of the blow, but something else changed too. Her eyes, warm and inviting seconds earlier, turned cold as January steel. The pleasant mask of the small-town waitress evaporated, replaced by something lethal. In one fluid motion, born of thousands of hours of training, Emily gripped the heavy oak chair beside her. With military precision and devastating force, she swung it in a perfect arc, catching all three leather-clad men across their backs. The sickening crack of wood against bone punctuated their surprised curses. The shortest one reached for a knife at his belt, but Emily was already moving. Her hands became weapons, precise, methodical, devastating. A throat strike that collapsed a windpipe. A solar plexus blow that drove the air from lungs. A wrist lock that snapped bone. In 8 seconds, all three men lay groaning on the linoleum floor. Their swagger shattered like the fallen coffee cups. Jack Miller, the 68-year-old diner owner, hadn't moved from his stool behind the counter. His weathered face showed no surprise as he studied Emily with knowing eyes. "Kosovo, 1983, he said quietly, his voice carrying in the stunned silence. "Which unit were you with?" Emily's chest rose and fell rapidly, her professional mask slipping as their eyes locked across the devastation. The screen faded to black, 12 hours earlier. Morning sun glinted off the chrome fixtures of Crossroads Diner, catching in the condensation on the front windows that hadn't changed since the Carter administration. The red neon open sign buzzed with a familiar hum, casting a warm glow across the counter, where three regulars hunched over their coffee cups. "I'm telling you that '79 Super Bowl was fixed," argued Hank Wilson, 73, jabbing a gnarled finger toward the television replaying classic football highlights. "No way Bradshaw makes that throw without divine intervention." "Divine intervention, my ass," countered Frank Dooley, retired Army sergeant. "That was pure skill. You're still sore because you lost $20 on the Cowboys." The friendly argument, one they had been having for over 40 years, brought a smile to Emily Blackwood's face as she refilled their cups. At 42, she moved through the diner with practiced efficiency, her blonde hair pulled back in a practical ponytail, her uniform crisp despite the morning rush. "More coffee, gentlemen?" she asked, though she already knew the answer. Crossroads Diner sat just off Route 76 in Millfield, Pennsylvania, a landmark since 1958. While the world outside had transformed through decades of progress and change within these walls, time moved differently. Faded Rambo and Rocky posters adorned wood-paneled walls. An authentic Corvette 1978 advertisement hung beside the restrooms. The jukebox in the corner, currently playing the Eagles' "Take It Easy," contained nothing recorded after 1990. Behind the counter, Jack Miller wiped down the surface with methodical movements. His large hands, calloused from years of labor, moved with surprising gentleness across the worn formica. At 68, Jack's frame remained solid, a testament to the physical discipline instilled during his years as a Marine from 1975 to 1989. His silver hair was still cut high and tight, his posture military straight. Jack watched Emily with quiet assessment. 8 months since he had hired her, and still the small inconsistencies nagged at him. The way she always positioned herself with sight lines to all entrances. The subtle scanning of each customer who entered. The surgical precision of the scar on her wrist. The unnatural stillness she adopted when startled. These weren't the habits of a career waitress. They were the instincts of someone trained to survive. The bell above the door jingled as Sheriff Carl Davidson entered right on schedule. At 72, Davidson was just weeks from retirement after serving Millfield for over 3 decades. His uniform still fit impeccably across his broad shoulders, and his eyes retained the sharp attentiveness that had made him an effective lawman. "Morning, Jack," Davidson said, settling onto his usual stool. "The usual, please?" Jack nodded and poured black coffee, setting it before the sheriff along with a jelly donut. 7 days, Jack remarked, nodding toward the badge. "Counting down." 8, Davidson corrected, "and not a moment too soon. Body's telling me it's time." He sipped his coffee, eyes tracking Emily as she moved among the tables. Your new waitress settling in all right. Jack wiped a non-existent spot on the counter. Efficient, punctual, customers like her. But, Davidson prompted, hearing the unspoken reservation. Before Jack could answer, the television cut from football highlights to a breaking news bulletin. The anchor's voice rose over the diner's ambient noise. Authorities are investigating connections between the motorcycle gang known as the Steel Serpents and a string of violent business intimidations across 3 counties. Last night's arson at a Hartsville hardware store marks the third such incident this month. The screen showed shattered storefronts in emergency vehicles, then cut to leather-clad men being led away in handcuffs. Several diners turned toward the television, conversations fading. In the corner booth, 4 Vietnam veterans leaned toward each other, speaking in hushed tones. Jim Caldwell owned that hardware store 30 years, said one. They broke both his arms when he wouldn't pay protection money. Bunch of animals, muttered another, targeting old-timers who can't fight back. Emily passed their table, keeping her expression neutral as she refilled coffee cups. Only Jack noticed how her knuckles whitened around the pot handle at their words. Davidson watched the news with a deepening frown. They're heading this way, moving through towns along the interstate. Organized? Jack asked. The sheriff nodded grimly. These aren't weekend warriors playing biker. Most have military backgrounds gone sour. Their leader calls himself Viper, was dishonorably discharged from some special ops unit. Jack's eyes narrowed slightly. On the wall behind him hung a bulletin board covered with community notices and photographs. Centered among them was a framed picture of a young man in a Marine dress uniform, Lieutenant Robert Miller, Jack's son. The plaque beneath read simply, "In memory, 1980-2010. Davidson followed Jack's gaze. 10 years this August, he said quietly. 15, Jack corrected, eyes still on the photograph. Time moves differently when they're gone. Emily approached, coffee pot in hand. Refill, Sheriff. Thank you, Emily. Davidson studied her with professional assessment. How are you finding our little town after, where was it you moved from, Colorado most recently? She answered with practiced ease. Everyone's been very welcoming. Small towns take care of their own. Davidson nodded. Been meaning to ask that apartment, working out, the one above the old hardware store. A barely perceptible tension crossed Emily's features. It's fine, good water pressure. As she moved away to greet new customers, Davidson leaned closer to Jack. Background check came back on her, he murmured. Too clean. No credit history before 5 years ago. No social media. Driver's license issued just 4 years ago. Professional scrub job. Jack raised an eyebrow but said nothing. Not saying she's trouble, Davidson continued, but she's running from something. Witness protection, maybe. Jack wiped the counter with slow, deliberate strokes. Her business is her business, Carl. Just keeping an eye out. These steel serpents rolling through has me on edge. The morning passed with the comfortable rhythm of small-town life. Around 11, the bell above the door chimed again. The temperature in the diner seemed to drop 10 degrees. 3 men entered, heavy boots thudding against the linoleum floor. They wore leather jackets despite the summer heat, each bearing a patch on the back, a metallic serpent coiled around a dagger. The leader stood slightly ahead of the others, his presence commanding immediate attention. Tall and powerfully built, a snake tattoo wound its way from his collar up his neck to his jawline. His hair was military short, a scar running through his right eyebrow. Conversations faltered and died. The jukebox seemed to dim as Bruce Springsteen gave way to uneasy silence. Seat yourselves anywhere, Emily said calmly, continuing to wipe a table as if they were any other customers. The leader Viper smirked and deliberately approached a booth occupied by an elderly couple. He stood at the edge of their table, staring down with cold amusement. This spot looks good, he said. You folks about done, the old man. Walter Jenkins, 78, retired pharmacist, looked up with confusion and unease. His wife Martha clutched her purse tighter. We're still eating, Walter said, voice wavering slightly. Viper leaned down, placing his palms flat on their table. That wasn't a request, old-timer. The 2 men flanking him chuckled, hands resting near visible knife outlines beneath their jackets. Jack stepped from behind the counter movements, unhurried but purposeful. Sheriff Davison turned on his stool, right hand casually moving toward his hip, where his service weapon rested. Before either could intervene, Emily appeared at the table, waitress smile fixed in place. But something had shifted in her posture, a subtle change that radiated controlled danger. Gentlemen, she said, voice level, there are empty booths. I'd be happy to seat you elsewhere. Viper straightened, turning his predatory assessment to Emily. His gaze lingered too long on her figure. Well, hello there, sweetheart, he said, voice a gravelly purr. Aren't you a pretty little thing? Something flickered in Emily's eyes, recognition there, and gone so quickly most would miss it. But Jack didn't. Neither did Viper, whose smile widened fractionally. The booth by the window just opened, Emily said, gesturing. Great view of the street. You can keep an eye on your bikes. For a moment, Viper seemed ready to escalate. Then, with a theatrical sigh, he nodded to his companions. Sure, why not? We'll take the window. As they moved, Viper deliberately bumped against Emily's shoulder. She didn't flinch, merely adjusted her stance to maintain balance. Emily brought menus to their table, maintaining her professional facade. Can I start you with coffee? Coffee for my friends, Viper said, leaning back. I'll take a beer. I'm sorry we don't serve alcohol. Viper's smile didn't reach his eyes. Shame. Water, then. As Emily turned away, Viper called after her. Hey, sweetheart, what's your name? She paused, then half-turned. Emily. Emily, he repeated, rolling the name around his mouth like tasting it. Pretty name. I'm Marcus. Friends call me Viper. His emphasis on the name hung in the air like a challenge. Emily's expression remained neutral, but Jack noticed the slight tensing of her shoulders. At the counter, Davidson finished his coffee and placed a $5 bill under his cup. Think I'll stick around a bit, he said quietly to Jack. For 20 tense minutes, an uneasy calm settled over the diner. The bikers ate occasionally, making comments just loud enough to carry about the backwater town and its geriatric population. Each time Emily approached their table, Viper found reasons to touch her arm or brush against her testing boundaries. Walter and Martha Jenkins finally gathered their belongings with the careful movements of the elderly. As they passed the biker's table, Viper stuck out his boot, causing Walter to stumble. The old man caught himself on a nearby chair. Watch your step, Pops, Viper said with a smirk. Martha helped steady her husband, face flushed with indignation. There's no call for that behavior, young man. Viper's expression hardened. Young man, lady, I'm 48. Old enough to know this town is ripe for changes. He leaned forward. Tell your friends the Steel Serpents are setting up shop here. Anyone with a business will be getting a visit about our protection services. Walter drew himself up with dignity. This town's been standing fine without your kind of protection. Viper stood suddenly, towering over the couple. Times change, old man. Either get with the program or get out of the way. Sheriff Davison rose, hand resting openly on his holstered weapon. That's enough. Time you boys paid your check and moved along. Viper's cold eyes assessed Davidson. Sure thing, Sheriff. He pulled out a wad of cash, peeling off several bills and tossing them on the table. Keep the change, Emily. Consider it a down payment. A down payment on what? She asked coolly. On our business relationship. We'll be having a longer conversation with every establishment in town about our fees. His smile turned predatory. Special rates for pretty waitresses, of course. This is a law-abiding town, Davidson said firmly. We don't have any need for your kind of business. Viper turned to face the sheriff fully. With all due respect to your badge, old-timer, you're what a week from retirement word travels. This town's got one sheriff and no deputies. The nearest state police barracks is 40 minutes away. His voice dropped. Lot can happen in 40 minutes. The tension crackled like static electricity. The Vietnam veterans at their table had gone silent, weathered faces hardening with readiness. Jack had moved to a position where he could reach the baseball bat beneath the register. Emily stepped between Viper and the elderly couple, voice calm but firm. Your bill comes to $32.75. I'll get your change. Viper's attention snapped back to her, something dangerous flickering in his eyes. Definite recognition now, though he masked it quickly. Keep it. He looked her up and down once more, then leaned closer to whisper something only she could hear. Emily's face went completely still, the stillness of a predator recognizing another of its kind. I'd prefer if you found somewhere else to eat in the future, she said, voice carrying in the silent diner. Even the jukebox seemed to hold its breath between tracks. Viper's face darkened. What did you just say to me? I said, Emily repeated each word distinct, that your business isn't welcome here. For 3 heartbeats, no one moved. Then Viper's hand lashed out with shocking speed, the crack of his palm against Emily's cheek echoing like a gunshot. "Know your place, bitch," he growled. What happened next occurred so quickly that most would later give conflicting accounts. Emily didn't stagger or cry out. Instead, her eyes changed. The pleasant waitress vanished, replaced by something cold and lethal. In one fluid motion, she gripped the heavy wooden chair and swung it with controlled violence into the backs of all three men. The crack of wood against bone was followed by curses of pain. The wiry man with a patchy beard reached for a knife. Emily moved with battlefield speed and precision. 3 strikes to pressure points, throat, solar plexus, kidney. A sweep of the legs sent one man crashing down. An elbow to the temple dropped another. A wrist lock and twist disarmed the knife wielder. In less than 10 seconds, all 3 steel serpents lay groaning on the floor. Jack Miller hadn't even risen from his stool. His weathered face showed no surprise as he studied Emily with knowing eyes. "Kosovo, 1983, he said quietly, voice carrying in the silence. "Which unit were you with?" Emily's chest rose and fell rapidly, her composed mask momentarily slipping. Sheriff Davidson stepped forward, hand still on his weapon, but expression caught between concern and admiration. "Everyone stay calm," he announced. "Situation's under control." He looked at the groaning men, then at Emily. "Though I think we're going to need to have a conversation about this." Emily straightened her apron with steady hands, the professional waitress persona sliding back into place. "Of course, Sheriff, after I clean up this mess." Yeah. The aftermath unfolded with methodical efficiency. Sheriff Davidson called in the incident, requesting assistance from the neighboring county. The diner's patrons provided brief statements with the reluctance of those unexpectedly thrust into drama. Jack closed early, flipping the sign and drawing the blinds, as Davidson led the 3 handcuffed bikers to his cruiser. Viper's eyes never left Emily. "This isn't over," he called from the doorway. "Not by a long shot. We know who you are now, Amanda." The name hung in the air like a grenade with the pin pulled. Emily's face betrayed nothing but her knuckles whitened at her sides. Once the last customer departed and the sheriff drove away with his prisoners, Jack locked the front door and turned to Emily, who continued cleaning as if nothing extraordinary had happened. "You want to tell me who you really are?" he asked, voice neither accusatory nor friendly, simply matter of fact. Emily straightened, dustpan in hand. "I'm exactly who I said I am when you hired me. Looking for a fresh start in a quiet town." "Those weren't the moves of someone looking for a quiet life," Jack said, moving behind the counter to pour 2 coffees. "That was professional training. Military or agency, I'd guess." Emily abandoned the pretense of cleaning and approached the counter, though she left the coffee untouched. "Does it matter I did what needed doing?" "It matters because those men will be back," Jack replied evenly, "and they won't come alone." A flicker of resignation crossed Emily's face. "I should leave town. This isn't your problem." "Bit late for that. Once the steel serpents target a place, they don't just walk away." Jack sipped his coffee. "Besides, Davidson will only be able to hold them for a day, maybe 2. Nothing that'll stick for long." "Then I definitely need to be gone before they're released." Jack studied her for a long moment. "Running's your business. But I've seen enough operators in my time to know when someone's carrying serious training. The way you handled those 3, that wasn't self-defense classes at the Y." Emily remained silent, her posture shifting almost imperceptibly into a defensive stance. "I served with Force Recon for 22 years, Jack continued. "Did another 16 after that with outfits that don't have names. I know professional movement when I see it." He paused. "Those men are ex-military gone bad. Their type holds grudges and they have got numbers. If you run, they'll either follow you or take their anger out on this town." The silence stretched between them, heavy with unspoken truths. Finally, Emily sighed and reached for the coffee. "I was a combat instructor," she admitted, voice low. "Hand-to-hand specialist for a specialized unit. I'm taking a break after an operation went sideways." It wasn't the whole truth, Jack could see that, but it was more than she'd revealed in 8 months. "He called you Amanda," Jack observed. Emily's cup froze halfway to her lips. "He's mistaken." "Is he?" The burner phone in Emily's pocket vibrated. She pulled it out, glanced at the screen, and her expression darkened. "They work fast," she muttered, turning the phone to show Jack. The text message read simply, "Found you, Amanda. Nowhere to run." Jack's weathered face hardened. Steel serpents is a front, he said. They're muscle for something bigger drug distribution, mostly fentanyl. They target places like Millfield because we're underfunded, undermanned, and off the radar. And Davidson, can he handle this? Carl's a good man, good sheriff, but he's one man with a badge in a town that hasn't seen serious trouble in decades. Jack's expression darkened. And he's right about retirement. His last day is next Friday. Town council's still interviewing replacements. Perfect timing for the serpents, Emily observed. Too perfect, Jack agreed, almost like they knew. The bell above the door jingled and both turned sharply. Jack relaxed slightly when Sheriff Davidson entered, looking tired but resolute. Forgot to lock up after yourself, Davidson said, securing the door behind him. Figured you'd be back, Jack replied. Davidson removed his hat and ran a hand through his thinning silver hair. Those three are cooling their heels, but it won't last. Their lawyer's already making noise about excessive force and self-defense. He turned to Emily. Which brings me to you, Ms. Blackwood, if that's really your name. Emily's expression remained neutral. It's the name on my W-2 forms. Davidson smiled thinly. Uh-huh. Well, whoever you are, you've stirred up a hornet's nest. That stunt with the chair was impressive, but what came after? He shook his head. Those weren't moves they teach in self-defense classes. I took some specialized training after a bad relationship, Emily offered smoothly. Ex-boyfriend issues. Must have been some training and some ex. Jack interrupted. What's the situation with the serpents, Carl? Davidson's expression turned grim. Bad. Got a call from Sheriff Tanner over in Hartsville. They hit 3 businesses there last week, roughed up owners who wouldn't pay torched one place as an example. They've got about 20 members in their core group, all armed, all dangerous. He fixed Emily with a hard stare. And their leader, this Viper character, he's not just some thug. Real name's Maxwell Reed, former military dishonorable discharge. Rumors he was Delta Force before something went wrong. Emily's face remained composed, but Jack noticed her slight tension at Reed's name. He made bail yet? She asked. Davidson shook his head. Processing them now. They'll go before Judge Harmon in the morning, but with their lawyer already making noise. He sighed. I'd be surprised if they spend more than 24 hours in custody. And which means we have 24 hours to prepare. Jack said, his tone shifting to something more tactical, the voice of a man who had commanded others in combat. Prepare for what exactly? Davidson asked, though his expression suggested he already knew. For when they come back, Jack replied evenly, and they will come back. Harder and in force. Davidson looked between Jack and Emily, his law enforcement instincts visibly at war with reality. I can call for backup from the state police, who are 40 minutes out understaffed and dealing with their own problems. Jack interrupted. By the time they got here, it would be too late. A heavy silence filled the diner. Outside, the summer afternoon was beginning to fade, golden light slanting through the blinds to cast long shadows across the floor. I should leave town, Emily said finally. This is my problem, not yours. Jack shook his head. They've already marked this place. Whether you're here or not, they'll come. And they'll make an example of Crossroads Diner to show the rest of the town what happens when someone stands up to them. He's right, Davidson agreed reluctantly. These types don't walk away from a challenge. They escalate. Emily's eyes met Jack's, a silent communication passing between two professionals who recognized each other, despite their different paths. Then we prepare, she said simply. Jack nodded and moved to the front door, checking that it was secure before pulling down the metal security gate that hadn't been used in years. He then walked to the antique cash register and pressed a hidden switch beneath the counter. A small panel in the floor behind the counter slid open, revealing a recessed safe. Davidson raised an eyebrow, but said nothing as Jack knelt and entered a combination. The safe opened with a soft click, revealing several handguns, boxes of ammunition, and items wrapped in oilcloth. Force of habit, Jack explained, lifting out a well-maintained Colt 1911. Always prepare for contingencies. Emily watched him with newfound respect. You've been expecting trouble for a while. Not expecting, Jack corrected, checking the pistol with practiced movements. Just ready. He looked up. How about you? Any contingencies I should know about? Emily hesitated, then reached beneath her uniform to reveal a compact 9mm in a concealed holster at the small of her back. Never leave home without it. Davidson sighed heavily. I should confiscate both weapons and arrest you for planning what sounds suspiciously like an ambush. You could, Jack acknowledged, or you could help us make sure no one else gets hurt. The sheriff removed his hat again, turning it in his hands as he considered his options. Finally, he looked up, decision made. I've got about a dozen shotguns and rifles in the station armory, he said. And I know at least 15 men in town who served in one branch or another who'd come if I called. Jack shook his head. We don't want to turn Main Street into a war zone. Better to keep this contained, just the three of us. Emily was already moving through the diner with purpose, assessing sight lines, access points, and defensive positions. Her movements were precise and analytical, the actions of someone who had secured locations under threat many times before. We have good visibility from these front windows, she noted. Limited access points, front door, back door, through the kitchen, possibly the roof. Solid cover behind the counter and these booths. She turned to Jack. How many do you think they'll bring? If they're smart, at least 10, Jack replied. Enough to overwhelm 3 defenders. Unless those defenders have home field advantage and preparation time, Emily countered. Davidson watched their exchange with growing concern. This is insane. You're talking about turning this diner into an armed camp. No, Emily corrected. We're talking about defending ourselves from criminals who have already demonstrated their willingness to use violence. She fixed Davidson with a steady gaze. You know they're coming back. The only question is whether we're ready when they do. Her phone vibrated again. This time the message contained a photo, a long-range shot of the diner's exterior taken within the last hour with Emily visible through the window. The text beneath it read, Steel serpents never forget. Black Talon remembers traitors. Emily's face went pale as she showed the message to Jack. Black Talon, whoa, he asked, his voice suddenly tight. Emily nodded grimly. They're not just here for your diner, Jack. They're here for me. She looked up, meeting his eyes. And they're connected to the people who killed your son. Jack's weathered face revealed nothing but his knuckles whitened around the pistol. How do you know about my son? Because I was there when it happened. The revelation hung in the air between them, pieces of a larger puzzle clicking into place. You were waiting for them to come here, Emily said. It wasn't a question, Jack nodded once. Sooner or later their expansion would bring them to Millfield. I've been ready for 2 years. Like I said, Davidson interrupted, this is getting out of hand. I need to call in state resources. Before anyone could respond, headlights swept across the front windows, a car pulling into the otherwise empty parking lot. All 3 tensed hands moving toward weapons. Jack rose silently and moved to the window, peering carefully through the blinds. Pizza delivery car, he reported, tone suspicious. Don't recall anyone ordering pizza. Emily's expression shifted, relief replacing tension. That's our help, she said, moving to the door and unlocking it. Right on time. The woman who entered was not what Davidson or Jack expected. In her mid-40s, with dark hair pulled back in a practical ponytail and wearing the uniform of Tony's Pizza, she looked like any delivery driver except for her eyes. Those eyes surveyed the room with the same professional assessment Emily had displayed earlier. Special delivery, the woman said, her voice carrying a hint of a northeastern accent. Emily nodded. Good to see you, Maria. The 2 women embraced briefly but warmly, the greeting of old comrades rather than friends. Took me 3 hours to get here, Maria Sanchez said, setting down what appeared to be an insulated pizza delivery bag on the nearest table. Traffic was a nightmare on the interstate. Emily gestured to Jack and Davidson. Jack Miller, owner of this establishment. Sheriff Carl Davidson. She turned to them. This is Maria Sanchez. We worked together. Before. Maria nodded to both men, her assessment swift and comprehensive. Former military, she asked Jack. Marines, he confirmed. Force recon, you. A slight smile crossed Maria's face. Something similar, different branch. She unzipped the pizza delivery bag, revealing not food but an assortment of compact equipment, communication devices, small cameras, and several items whose purpose wasn't immediately obvious. Brought what I could grab on short notice, she explained, removing items and setting them on the table. 2 encrypted radios, 4 motion sensors, tactical flashlights, first aid kit, and a few other helpful items. Davidson stared at the equipment, then at Maria. you're not really a pizza delivery person, are you? Maria's smile widened slightly. Today I am. It's a good cover. No one questions a pizza car parked anywhere. Jack was examining the equipment with the practiced eye of someone familiar with tactical gear. Government issue, he noted. Recent model. Let's just say it fell off a truck, Maria replied smoothly. She turned to Emily. What's the situation? As Emily briefed Maria, Jack continued sorting through the equipment. His hands moved with the confidence of someone who had used similar tools before checking batteries and functions with practiced efficiency. Davidson watched the three of them with growing amazement. These were not ordinary people. They moved and spoke in the shorthand of professionals accustomed to danger and violence. I need to make some calls, he said finally. Get my deputy back from his fishing trip, alert the state police that we might have a situation. Emily nodded, but her focus remained on the tactical planning underway. How long would it take to get meaningful backup here? Davidson hesitated. Honestly, hours. Maybe too long. Then we plan as if it's just us, Emily replied. As Davidson stepped outside to make his calls, Jack continued examining the diner's layout with new eyes. Not as the owner of a small-town establishment, but as a former special operator assessing a defensive position. The counter provides good cover, he noted. Kitchen has a clear line of retreat if needed. Windows are vulnerable, but we can reinforce them. Maria was already moving through the space, placing the small motion sensors at key points: the front door, the back entrance, the side alley. These will give us early warning, she explained. Range of about 100 yards, depending on conditions. Emily nodded approvingly. What about firepower? Jack has his contingencies, but we might need more. Maria patted the pizza bag. 2 more 99 millimeters in the false bottom plus extra magazines. Not enough for a war, but enough to make them think twice. Jack disappeared into the back room, returning moments later with a shotgun and a ring of keys. Time to show you the real contingency plan, he said grimly. He led them to a door at the rear of the kitchen that Emily had assumed led to a storage closet. Jack unlocked it, revealing a narrow staircase descending into darkness. Prohibition-era smuggling route, he explained, flipping a switch that illuminated the stairwell with bare bulbs. Runs under Main Street to what used to be a speakeasy, now the hardware store. Previous owner showed me when I bought the place in '92. Emily and Maria exchanged impressed glances as they followed Jack down the stairs. The passage was narrow but solid, brick-lined, and surprisingly well-maintained. I've kept it up over the years, Jack continued as they reached the bottom. Never knew when it might come in handy. The basement area opened into a small room that had clearly been repurposed. What might once have been a storage space for bootleg liquor now contained a gun safe, ammunition boxes, a workbench with tools, and several crates, labeled with military designation codes. Jack, Emily said slowly, this is a bit more than contingencies. The older man shrugged. When you've seen what I've seen, you'll learn to be prepared. He opened the gun safe, revealing several rifles, handguns, and boxes of ammunition. My son, Robert, was of the same mind. After he died, I kept everything ready. Force of habit. Maria was examining the space with professional approval. This changes our tactical options. We can use this as a fallback position or as a means to flank attackers. Emily nodded in agreement, but her attention had been caught by something else, a map on the wall with locations marked in red. She stepped closer, studying it. These are Steel Serpent's operations, she realized aloud. Hartsville, Riverside, Greene County. You've been tracking them. Jack nodded grimly. For months, ever since they started moving into the region. Why? Emily asked, though she suspected she already knew the answer. Jack was silent for a moment, his weathered face revealing nothing. Finally, he spoke, his voice low and controlled. Because the man who calls himself Viper Maxwell Reed was part of the unit that got my son killed. He looked up, meeting Emily's gaze with eyes hardened by years of contained grief. The official report called it a training accident. It wasn't. The revelation hung in the air between them, pieces of a larger puzzle clicking into place. You were waiting for them to come here, Emily said. It wasn't a question. Jack nodded once. Sooner or later, their expansion would bring them to Millfield. I've been ready for 2 years. Maria had moved to examine the map more closely. This is detailed intelligence work, she noted. Traffic patterns, safe houses, supply routes. Like I said, I've had time to prepare. Jack turned to Emily. but I didn't expect them to target my diner first. And I certainly didn't expect one of my waitresses to take down 3 of them single-handedly. Emily held his gaze, and I didn't expect to find myself working for a man hunting the same organization I have been running from. Jack's eyes narrowed. Black Talon. Emily nodded slowly. I was undercover with them for 3 years. Deep cover off-books operation. I gathered enough evidence to take down their entire East Coast operation. Her expression darkened. Then something went wrong. The raid was compromised. 6 agents died. And you've been running ever since, Jack concluded. They discovered I was the leak, put a $2 million bounty on my head. Emily's laugh held no humor. I've been Emily Blackwood for 8 months. Before that, I was Sarah Chen in Colorado. Before that, Lisa Miller in Oregon. And before that, Jack pressed. Emily met his gaze steadily. Before that, I was Special Agent Amanda Reynolds' FBI Counterterrorism Division. The woman who was supposed to be in that building with your son the day of the training accident. Before Jack could respond, one of the radios Maria had brought crackled to life. Movement at the perimeter, Maria reported, checking the small receiver. Front sensor, single vehicle approaching slowly. The 3 of them exchanged glances, the conversation about past connections temporarily shelved in favor of immediate concerns. Could be Davidson returning, Emily suggested. Could be scouts, Jack countered. They moved quickly back up the stairs, Jack securing the basement door behind them. In the diner proper, they positioned themselves with clear views of the street while remaining out of sight from outside. A black SUV with tinted windows rolled slowly past the diner, its headlights off despite the gathering dusk. It circled the block once, then parked across the street, engine running. Definitely surveillance, Maria murmured, observing through a small gap in the blinds. Professional technique, military or law enforcement trained. Emily nodded in agreement, her expression grim. They're assessing our position, planning their approach. Jack checked his watch. 17 hours until those 3 make bail, give or take. But it looks like their friends aren't waiting that long. The SUV remained across the street, a dark presence in the gathering twilight. Inside Crossroads Diner, 3 combat professionals continued their preparations, their movements economical and precise. The quiet before the storm had begun. They'll come at night, Emily predicted, her voice steady. Less visibility, fewer witnesses. Jack nodded in agreement. Which gives us about 3 hours to turn this diner into a fortress. Maria was already unpacking the remainder of her equipment. Then we'd better get started. As they worked, a strange calm settled over Emily. The past she had been running from had finally caught up with her, but this time she wasn't facing it alone. For better or worse, Crossroads. Diner was about to become a battleground, and Emily Blackwood, Amanda Reynolds, was ready for war. Sheriff Davidson returned 45 minutes later, his expression grim, as he locked the diner door behind him. Got a problem, he announced without preamble. Judge Harmon got a call from the Steel Serpent's lawyer. He's expediting their bail hearing to tonight instead of tomorrow morning. Jack paused in his work securing the windows. How soon? 2 hours, maybe less. Davidson ran a hand through his thinning hair. And there's more. I've got reports of at least a dozen motorcycles checking into the Pineview Motel on the edge of town. My deputy counted 15 men, all wearing serpent colors. Emily and Maria exchanged glances. The timeline had accelerated dramatically. What about backup? Emily asked. Davidson shook his head. State police can send 2 cruisers, but not until morning. There's a pileup on the interstate tying up all available units. So it's just us, Jack had concluded, his tone matter-of-fact rather than alarmed. Not exactly, Davidson replied. I made some calls. 4 of my closest friends, all former military or law enforcement, are gearing up. They'll be positioned strategically around town, but out of sight unless needed. Jack nodded approvingly. Good thinking, Carl. Emily had moved to the front window, carefully observing the black SUV still parked across the street. They're coordinating, she noted. The driver's been on the phone constantly. Maria joined her at the window. Planning their assault. I count 3 men in the vehicle, probably more on standby nearby. A cell phone rang, not Emily's burner, but the landline behind the counter. Jack approached it cautiously, eyeing the caller ID. Block number. Emily nodded. Put it on speaker. Jack answered, hitting the speaker button. Crossroads Diner. Jack Miller. The voice was instantly recognizable. Viper. Or should I say Staff Sergeant John Miller, Force Recon, retired. Medal of Honor nominee after Beirut 1983. Jack's expression remained neutral. What do you want, Reed? A low chuckle came through the speaker. So you know who I am? Good. Makes this conversation simpler. A pause. You've got something that belongs to us, or rather, someone. Nobody here belongs to you, Jack replied evenly. I beg to differ. Special Agent Amanda Reynolds has been a fugitive from justice for nearly 5 years. There's quite a price on her head. Emily moved closer to the phone, her face hard. What do you want, Max? There she is, Viper's voice took on a mocking tone. The ghost herself. You know, after you disappeared from that safe house in Denver, some people thought you were dead. Sorry to disappoint, Emily replied coldly. Oh, I'm not disappointed at all. In fact, finding you is the highlight of my year. The sound of a lighter clicking came through the speaker. Here's how this goes. You have 1 hour to walk out that door alone and unarmed. My men will pick you up. No one else needs to get hurt. And if I don't, then we burn that diner to the ground with everyone inside. Viper's voice hardened. You know what we're capable of, Amanda. You've seen our work firsthand. Emily's eyes met Jack's across the counter. A silent communication passed between them. 1 hour, Viper repeated. And just so you know we're serious. The line went dead. Seconds later, a muffled explosion shook the diner as a parked car across the street burst into flames. That was Walter Jenkins' Buick, Davidson said grimly, peering through the blinds at the burning vehicle. Jack turned to Emily, his expression resolute. I think it's time we showed them what we're capable of. As smoke billowed into the darkening sky outside, the defenders of Crossroads Diner made their final preparations, knowing that the real battle was about to begin. The Buick's flames painted the darkening street in shades of orange and red, casting ominous shadows across the walls of Crossroads Diner. Inside, Emily watched through a gap in the blinds as fire truck sirens wailed in the distance. Across the street, the black SUV remained its occupants invisible behind tinted windows. That was just to get our attention, Emily said, her voice steady despite the escalation. The real show starts when the hour's up. Jack nodded grimly, his weathered hands methodically checking the action on his Colt 1911. 53 minutes, Sheriff Davidson paced near the door, decades of law enforcement instincts, battling with the reality of their situation. This has gone too far. I need to evacuate the businesses on either side of the diner. Do it, Jack agreed, but quietly. Tell them there's a gas leak. Last thing we need is civilians in the crossfire. As Davidson slipped out the back door, Maria finished placing the last motion sensor and rejoined Emily at the window. Primary target is you, she said matter-of-factly. Secondary is anyone who helps you. Standard Black Talon protocol. Emily's jaw tightened. I should walk out there. This isn't your fight. It became my fight when they targeted my town. Jack interrupted, not looking up from his weapon. And my diner. And when I learned they killed my son. They'll kill you too, Emily warned. Jack's weathered face showed no fear, only cold determination. I've been ready to die since I buried Robert. But I'd rather take some of these bastards with me. The phone behind the counter rang, cutting through the tension. Jack answered on speaker. Thinking about my offer, Miller, Viper's voice was smooth, confident. We're not handing anyone over to you, Jack replied evenly. A cold laugh answered him. You know, I looked you up after our little scuffle. Force Recon Beirut 83. Distinguished Service Cross. Quite the war hero. Viper paused. And then there's your son, Lieutenant Robert Miller. Tragic training accident, wasn't it? Jack's knuckles whitened around the receiver. You say one more word about my son. Your son stuck his nose where it didn't belong. Viper cut in, his voice hardening. Just like your waitress. Just like you're doing now. Emily moved to Jack's side, placing a steadying hand on his arm. She leaned toward the speaker. This is between you and me, Max. Let these people go, and I'll walk out. Amanda Reynolds, Viper drawled, savoring the name. The ghost herself. 5 years we've been hunting you. 5 years since you betrayed your country. I betrayed nothing, Emily shot back. I exposed traitors who were selling military-grade weapons to drug cartels. Men like you who dishonored their uniforms. Such righteous indignation, Viper mocked. Tell me, does Jack know the whole story? Does he know you were supposed to meet his son that day? That if you'd been on time, Robert might still be alive? Emily flinched as if struck. Jack's eyes snapped to her face searching. 45 minutes, Amanda, Viper continued. Then we come get you, and everyone in that diner becomes collateral damage. Their blood on your hands just like Robert's. The line went dead. In the heavy silence that followed, Jack stared at Emily, his expression unreadable. Is it true? He asked finally. About Robert. Maria moved discreetly away, giving them privacy while continuing her defensive preparations. Emily met Jack's gaze directly. Yes. She admitted, her voice steady despite the weight of the confession. Robert contacted the FBI with evidence that members of his unit were working with Black Talon. He requested me, specifically because of my work on organized crime. But I was delayed on another case. Her eyes never wavered from his. By the time I arrived, it was too late. Jack absorbed this in silence, his weathered face revealing nothing of the storm that must be raging within. Finally, he nodded once, a gesture of acknowledgement, not necessarily forgiveness. Then we both have scores to settle, he said, simply turning back to his preparations. Emily understood the depth of what had just passed between them, a recognition of shared grief and shared purpose that transcended blame. There would be time for a fuller reckoning later if they survived. Maria, she called, refocusing on their immediate situation. What assets do we have? Maria moved to the counter and spread out a rough sketch of the diner and surrounding area. 3 handguns, the shotgun, whatever I brought. The underground passage gives us a potential escape route or flanking position. The motion sensors give us early warning. Emily studied the layout. They'll hit us from multiple angles. Front door, kitchen entrance, probably try to come through the roof, access in the bathroom. We're outnumbered at least 5 to 1, Maria noted. We need to even the odds. Emily's eyes drifted to the diner itself, the heavy furniture, the kitchen equipment, the narrow hallways. Then we change the battlefield. Make them fight on our terms. A slow smile spread across Jack's face as he recognized the tactical approach. Force multipliers, bottlenecks, improvised weapons. Exactly, Emily nodded. We can't outgun them, but we can outsmart them. For the next 20 minutes, they transformed the homey diner into a fortress. Tables were overturned to create barriers. Cooking oil was strategically spilled near entrances. The lights were reconfigured to create blind spots in areas of dazzling brightness. The jukebox was rewired to act as a distraction. Jack disappeared into the basement and returned with several items from his stockpile: smoke grenades, flashbangs, and a handful of small devices Emily recognized as military-grade motion triggers. Robert sent these home before his last deployment, Jack explained, distributing them with practiced efficiency. Said they might come in handy someday. Emily accepted one of the devices with a nod of thanks. Your son was Force Recon too? No, Jack's voice softened slightly. He was something else, something they don't put in the official records. Before Emily could ask more, the back door opened, and Sheriff Davison returned slightly breathless from his evacuation efforts. Businesses on both sides are clear, he reported. But I've got bad news. Just got word from the courthouse, Judge Harmon granted bail to all 3 steel serpents 10 minutes ago. They're being processed for release right now. Jack checked his watch. That moves up the timeline. There's more, Davidson continued grimly. My deputy spotted at least 4 more bikes arriving at the Pineview. They're mobilizing. Emily moved to the front window again, assessing the street with a professional detachment. What about your backup, the 4 friends you called? In position, Davidson confirmed, but I told them to hold unless I give the signal. No sense exposing them until necessary. Maria, who had been monitoring the sensors, raised a hand for silence. Movement, southwest corner, near the alley. All 4 defenders tensed, hands moving to weapons. On the small receiver, a blinking light confirmed Maria's warning. Someone was approaching the diner's rear entrance. Single individual, Maria reported, moving cautiously. Jack positioned himself with a clear line of sight to the kitchen door, shotgun raised. Emily flanked him on the left, her 9mm steady in her grip. Davidson drew a service weapon and took cover behind the counter. The kitchen door handle turned slowly, then stopped. A moment of tense silence followed, broken only by the distant sound of fire trucks attending to the burning Buick. 3 soft knocks sounded on the metal door, a distinct pattern. Maria relaxed slightly. That's a friendly signal. She approached the door cautiously, weapon still ready. Identify, she called. Crimson Protocol Second Wave, came a woman's voice from the other side. Agent Cass Parker. Emily's eyes widened in recognition. She nodded to Maria, who unlocked the door and admitted a tall, athletic woman in her late 30s, dressed in civilian clothes, jeans, dark jacket, and a baseball cap, pulled low over her face. Cass, Emily breathed relief evident in her voice. How did you... Maria's call triggered a few alerts, Cass explained, quickly assessing the diner's defensive preparations with approval. I was in Pittsburgh running point on the Black Talon investigation when her signal came through. I've had a go-bag ready for 3 years just waiting for this moment. Jack studied the newcomer with the careful assessment of a veteran soldier. Another former colleague. Emily nodded. Cassandra Parker, the best markswoman I've ever seen. We worked the Black Talon case together from the beginning. Cass removed her jacket, revealing a tactical vest underneath and a compact rifle broken down into components, which she quickly began assembling. Not just Black Talon, I was also investigating their connection to the training accident that killed Lieutenant Robert Miller. Jack's head snapped up, his eyes locking onto Cass with sudden intensity. You know about Robert? Cass finished assembling her rifle, a customized sniper setup, and met Jack's gaze. I was assigned to the internal investigation after it happened. The official story was bullshit from the start. The tension in the room thickened as Jack processed this information. What really happened to my son? He stumbled onto something he wasn't supposed to see. Cass replied, her voice gentler, but still professional. Evidence that certain members of his unit were working with Black Talon, providing military-grade weapons and training in exchange for drug money. Maxwell Reed. Jack said the name like gravel in his mouth. Cass nodded. Reed was the connection between the military unit and Black Talon. Your son gathered evidence, was preparing to report it up the chain when they killed him and called it a training accident. Jack finished, decades of controlled grief evident in the tightness around his eyes. Emily placed a hand on Jack's shoulder. I was supposed to meet Robert that day, she said quietly. He had contacted the FBI, asked specifically for me because of my work on organized crime. But I got delayed on another case. By the time I arrived, he was already dead, Jack concluded. The weight of shared history settled between them, not forgiveness exactly, but a recognition of common purpose forged in tragedy. A heavy silence fell over the diner, broken by Davidson, whose law enforcement instincts refocused them on the immediate threat. Incoming, he warned, pointing to the monitor where 2 more sensors had activated. Multiple contacts approaching from the east and north. Cass moved smoothly to the window rifle at the ready. I count 4 motorcycles parking down the block. 2 men by the SUV are exiting, moving toward the front. They're earlier than expected, Maria noted, checking her watch. We still have 30 minutes on Viper's ultimatum. Emily's expression hardened with understanding. They're not waiting. The ultimatum was just to keep us distracted while they position their forces. She turned to the others. They're coming now. As if confirming her assessment, the phone behind the counter rang again. Jack answered on speaker. Change of plans, Miller. Viper's voice came through, all pretense of civility gone. We're done waiting. Send her out now or we start shooting. Not happening, Jack replied evenly. A cold laugh answered him. Your funeral, old man. The line went dead. Positions, Emily ordered, her voice shifting to command mode. Davidson counter, Maria kitchen, Cass high ground. The storage loft has sight lines to both entrances. Jack. I know my diner, he interrupted with grim confidence, moving to a position behind an overturned table with clear fields of fire toward the front door. Emily took a deep breath, centering herself as she had before countless operations. Remember, they want me alive, but they won't hesitate to kill the rest of you. Don't take chances. Seconds ticked by in tense silence. Outside, the evening had fully darkened, the only illumination coming from streetlights and the still smoldering remains of the Buick. The attack, when it came, was coordinated and professional. The front window shattered as something metallic crashed through it, bouncing across the floor with a metallic clang. Emily recognized it instantly. Flashbang down, she shouted. The defenders ducked as the stun grenade detonated with a deafening bang and blinding flash. Simultaneously, the back door burst open with a splintering crash as a battering ram broke through. Through the ringing in her ears, Emily heard the thunder of Jack's shotgun as he fired at shadowy figures attempting to enter through the shattered window. Davidson's service weapon barked 3 times from behind the counter. From her elevated position in the storage loft, Cass fired with surgical precision, dropping a man who had made it halfway through the window. In the kitchen, Maria engaged 2 attackers who had breached the rear entrance, the sharp reports of her pistol punctuated by grunts of pain. Emily stayed low, moving between defensive positions, picking her shots carefully. These weren't ordinary criminals. They moved with tactical discipline, using cover and suppressive fire as they attempted to breach the diner's defenses. East side clear, Cass reported from above, her voice professional despite the chaos. Reloading. A second flashbang came through the broken window, but Jack was ready. He kicked it back out before it could detonate the explosion outside, followed by curses of pain. They're trying to flank through the bathroom, Maria called from the kitchen. 2 tangos. Emily sprinted toward the narrow hallway leading to the bathrooms, arriving just as the ceiling access panel crashed down. A black-clad figure dropped through the opening weapon, already tracking toward her. Emily fired twice center mass. The man crumpled his weapon, clattering to the floor. A second attacker hesitated in the ceiling opening, then disappeared with a scramble of movement. Bathroom clear, she reported, retreating to cover as bullets splintered the doorframe around her. The first wave of the assault had been repelled, but Emily knew it was just the beginning. Through the broken window, she could see more figures gathering in the shadows across the street. Reload and check, she ordered, ejecting her own partially spent magazine and slapping in a fresh one. Status 2 down by the front, Jack reported, his breath coming in controlled bursts as he reloaded the shotgun. 1 critical, 1 wounded. 1 down in the kitchen, 1 retreated, Maria added. No casualties on our side. Davidson emerged from behind the counter, a thin trickle of blood running from a cut on his forehead where flying glass had caught him. They're better armed than I expected. Military-grade weapons. Black Talon doesn't skimp on equipment, Cass confirmed from her perch. I count at least 8 more outside regrouping. Emily's mind raced through tactical options. They had repelled the first assault, but the defenders were outnumbered and couldn't sustain a prolonged engagement. They needed to change the dynamics of the fight. Jack, she said suddenly, the underground passage. Does it connect directly to the hardware store? Jack nodded. Comes up through a false wall in their storage room. Is there roof access from there? A slow smile of understanding spread across Jack's weathered face. South corner, old fire escape. Emily turned to Cass. Think you can set up a sniper position if we get you up there? Give me 3 minutes and a clear path, Cass confirmed. Maria and I will create a diversion, Emily continued. Make them think we're attempting to break out through the front. Meanwhile, Jack takes Cass through the tunnel to the hardware store and up to the roof. Davidson checked his ammunition with a frown. That leaves you outnumbered up here. We're already outnumbered, Emily countered, but this gives us a tactical advantage. High ground crossfire. Maria nodded her agreement. Classic hammer and anvil. We pin them between positions. A new voice cut through their planning, vipers amplified by a bullhorn from outside. Amanda Reynolds. His voice echoed down the empty street. You've got nowhere to run this time. We've got the diner surrounded. Send yourself out and maybe your new friends live. Emily moved cautiously to the window, staying hidden in the shadows. Through a gap in the blinds, she could see Viper standing beside the black SUV, bullhorn in one hand, pistol in the other. What do you say, Amanda? He continued. More blood on your hands, like Robert Miller's, like your team in Denver. The taunt struck its intended target. Emily's face hardened, a muscle working in her jaw. Don't let him get to you, Jack warned quietly. That's what he wants. Emily nodded, then moved to a position where her voice would carry outside without exposing herself. You want me, Max? Come and get me yourself. Or are you still hiding behind better men while taking credit for their work? A murmur ran through the steel serpents positioned around the diner. Viper's face darkened with anger. You always did talk too much, he snarled into the bullhorn. 2 minutes before we come in full force. Emily turned back to the others. Jack, Cass, go. Now. Maria and I will handle the diversion in 90 seconds. Jack hesitated just a moment, then nodded sharply. He and Cass disappeared through the kitchen toward the basement access, moving with the quiet efficiency of combat veterans. Emily turned to Davidson. Sheriff, you should go with them. No sense in you dying here. Davidson's weathered face set in stubborn lines. Son, I've been sheriff of this town for 32 years. I'm not abandoning it now. A grim smile touched Emily's lips. Fair enough. She handed him one of Jack's flashbangs. When I give the signal, throw this through the broken window, then provide covering fire while Maria and I make noise at the front. Outside, the attackers were visible as he had shadows moving into position surrounding the diner on three sides. 30 seconds, Maria reported, checking her watch. Emily took a deep breath, steadying herself. So much had changed in the few hours since Viper had slapped her face in this very diner. The carefully constructed identity of Emily Blackwood had been stripped away, revealing the combat operator beneath. In some ways, it was a relief, like shrugging off a too-tight jacket that had restricted her movements for years. "Ready?" she asked Maria and Davidson. Both nodded, weapons prepared. Now, Davidson pulled the pin and threw the flashbang with surprising accuracy through the shattered window. The explosion was followed by shouts of confusion and pain. Emily and Maria rushed toward the front of the diner, firing controlled bursts at the shadows outside while carefully avoiding hitting actual targets. The goal wasn't to kill, but to draw attention, and it worked. Return fire hammered the front of the diner, bullets punching through the remaining windows and splintering the wooden frames. Emily and Maria took cover behind overturned tables as glass and debris rained around them. "Keep their focus for another minute," Emily directed. "Cass needs time to get in position." Davidson fired steadily from behind the counter, his decades of experience evident in his calm, measured shots. "Like shooting tin cans off the fence," he muttered. "Just noisier." Through her earpiece, Emily heard Jack's voice. "In position. Cass is setting up on the hardware store roof. Southeast corner, clear sight lines to the diner and the street." "Copy that," Emily replied. "Stand by." The firefight intensified as more attackers joined the assault. Bullets riddled the diner's interior, shattering coffee cups and puncturing the vintage jukebox, which sputtered to life with a distorted version of Creedence Clearwater Revival's "Fortunate Son." "How appropriate," Maria commented dryly, ducking as a round passed too close to her head. Outside, Emily could hear Viper shouting orders, directing his men to prepare for a coordinated rush from multiple directions. Their diversion had worked perhaps too well. The defenders inside the diner were now pinned down under heavy fire. "Get ready," Emily warned. "They're going to rush us in force." As if on cue, the gunfire from outside momentarily ceased. In the sudden silence, broken only by the dying notes of the jukebox, Viper's voice rang out. "Final chance, Amanda, surrender now." Emily caught Maria's eye and nodded. It was time for the next phase of their plan. "Go to hell, Max," she shouted back. The response was immediate, a barrage of covering fire followed by the sound of multiple attackers rushing the diner from different directions. "Cass, execute," Emily ordered into her earpiece. The crack of a high-powered rifle split the night. One of the attackers rushing the front door crumpled mid-stride. A second shot and another fell. The precise, methodical rhythm of Cass's shooting created momentary confusion among the attackers, who couldn't immediately identify the source of this new threat. Emily seized the advantage, rising from cover to engage the men who had made it through the broken window. Her shots were precise, one to the shoulder, disabling without killing, another to the leg of a man trying to flank Davidson's position. From the kitchen, Maria called out a warning. "Two more coming through the back." "On it," Emily responded, moving swiftly toward the kitchen. As she rounded the corner, she came face to face with a large attacker in tactical gear, his weapon already raised. Time slowed as her training took over. She ducked under his aim, closing the distance before he could adjust. A strike to his wrist sent the weapon clattering to the floor. Her follow-up blow to his sternum drove the air from his lungs. As he doubled over, her knee connected with his face, dropping him unconscious to the floor. The second attacker fired from the doorway, the bullet grazing Emily's upper arm. She rolled behind the industrial stove, drawing him further into the kitchen. "Emily," Maria called in warning. "I'm fine. Watch the front." The attacker advanced cautiously, weapon sweeping the kitchen. He was good, moving with the careful precision of professional training. But Emily had spent years perfecting the art of close-quarters combat. She waited until he passed the prep table, then triggered the trap they'd prepared. A hanging pot filled with cooking oil crashed down, spilling its contents across the floor. The attacker slipped, momentarily losing his balance. It was all the opening Emily needed. She launched herself from cover, a kitchen knife gripped in her left hand. Not to stab, but to threaten, forcing him to recoil and further lose his footing on the slick floor. As he fell, she disarmed him with a twisting lock that nearly broke his wrist, then rendered him unconscious with a precise strike to the temple. Kitchen clear, she reported, retrieving both fallen weapons. Outside, Cass continued her methodical fire from the hardware store roof, the precision of her shots forcing the attackers to seek deeper cover. Through her earpiece, Emily heard Jack's voice. 6 tangos down or wounded. 4 still active, including Viper. They're regrouping behind the SUV. Emily rejoined Maria and Davidson at the front of the diner, pausing to bandage her bleeding arm with a dish towel. We've thinned them out, but they still have numbers. Davidson checked his ammunition with a grimace. I'm down to my last magazine. Same here, Maria confirmed. Emily assessed their situation with cool detachment. They had repelled the initial assault and inflicted significant casualties, but their resources were dwindling. The defenders were trapped in the diner, and while Cass's sniper position provided valuable support, it wouldn't be enough if Viper committed all his remaining forces to a final push. A new sound cut through the momentary lull in gunfire, the distinctive wail of police sirens approaching from the distance. Davidson's eyes widened. That's not my deputy. State police. Can't be, Maria replied. You said they couldn't get here until morning. Emily moved carefully to the window, peering through a gap in the blinds. Down the street, red and blue lights flashed as multiple vehicles approached at high speed. Someone called in the cavalry, she observed. Jack's voice came through the earpiece. My doing, had a satellite phone in my go bag, called in a favor from an old friend at the FBI field office in Pittsburgh. For the first time that night, Emily felt a flicker of hope. If legitimate federal agents were arriving, the odds would shift dramatically in their favor. But her hope was short-lived. Through the window, she watched as Viper emerged from behind the SUV, assessing the approaching sirens with cold calculation. He raised a handheld radio to his lips, issuing rapid orders to his remaining men. They're not retreating, Emily realized aloud. They're accelerating their timeline. Viper's voice suddenly boomed through the bullhorn again. Amanda, you hear those sirens. Your cavalry's coming, but they won't find you here. Emily froze, understanding washing over her like ice water. He's not trying to kill us anymore. He's trying to take me alive before reinforcements arrive. As if confirming her assessment, a new barrage of gunfire hammered the diner wilder, less disciplined than before, not intended to hit targets, but to pin down the defenders. Cover, Emily shouted, pulling Davidson down as bullets tore through the space where he'd been standing. Through the chaos, Emily caught glimpses of movement, Viper and 2 men breaking from cover, racing not away from the diner, but toward it, using the suppressive fire as cover for their advance. They're rushing us, Maria warned, attempting to return fire, but forced back by the intensity of the barrage. Emily keyed her earpiece. Cass, Viper, and 2 tangos approaching the front, 10 o'clock. Negative shot, came the frustrated reply. No clear line through the suppressive fire. Emily's mind raced. Viper wasn't retreating from the approaching authorities. He was making a final push to complete his mission to capture her before help arrived. It was a desperate gambit, but one that might succeed given their depleted resources. A metallic object crashed through the window, rolling across the floor toward them. Grenade, Emily shouted, recognizing it instantly. There was no time to throw it back. Acting on pure instinct, Emily lunged forward, scooping up the grenade and hurling it toward the kitchen, away from Maria and Davidson, before diving behind the counter. The explosion rocked the diner, the blast partially contained by the kitchen walls, but still powerful enough to send debris flying throughout the space. Dust and smoke filled the air, momentarily blinding the defenders. Through the ringing in her ears, Emily heard the front door crash open. Shadowy figures moved through the smoke, Viper and his men using the confusion to breach their defenses. Emily raised her weapon, but a second explosion, this one from a flashbang, disoriented her further. A heavy weight slammed into her from the side, driving her to the floor as gunfire erupted around her. She fought back with desperate intensity, landing solid blows against her attacker. But another figure joined the fray, pinning her arms while the first attacker secured her legs. Got her, a rough voice called. Moving to extract, Emily bucked and twisted her combat training, allowing her to break one arm free. She struck out blindly, connecting with something solid enough to elicit a curse of pain. Subdue her, Viper's voice ordered from somewhere nearby. Through the smoke, she caught a glimpse of his face, the snake tattoo vivid against his skin, eyes cold with triumph as he approached. Hello, Amanda, he said, voice low and personal. 5 years is a long time to chase someone. Not long enough, she spat back, still struggling against her captors. Viper's smile was cold as he raised his pistol. Nowhere to run this time. A sharp pain exploded in her temple as the pistol butt struck her head. The world swam darkness, encroaching at the edges of her vision. "Jack," she managed to call out. "Maria, stay down." Through the haze of approaching unconsciousness, Emily was aware of being dragged toward the door. She fought to stay awake, to resist, but the blow to her head had done its work. The last thing she registered before blackness claimed her was Jack's voice in her earpiece, urgent, desperate. "They've got Emily's south exit. Cass, do you have a shot?" Then nothing, and one. Consciousness returned in painful increments. First came sound, the rumble of an engine, the creak of leather seats, the murmur of low voices. Then sensation, her hands bound behind her back, a throbbing pain in her temple, the metallic taste of blood in her mouth. Emily kept her eyes closed, feigning continued unconsciousness while she assessed her situation. She was in a moving vehicle, the SUV most likely. From the turns and accelerations, they were traveling at high speed on back roads. "Should have just killed her," a voice was saying. "The cops were right behind us." "Orders are to bring her in alive," Viper's distinctive growl responded. "The boss wants to make an example of her." "What about the others?" a third voice asked. "Collateral damage," Viper dismissed. "The old man took a round to the shoulder. The sheriff's probably dead from the grenade. The woman in the kitchen took at least 2 hits." Emily suppressed a surge of rage and grief at these casual words. "Focus," she told herself. "Assess. Plan." From the conversation she gathered, there were 3 men in the vehicle with her, Viper, and 2 subordinates. Her hands were secured with zip ties, but her ankles appeared to be free. Her head injury was painful but not debilitating. The grogginess was already clearing. Most importantly, they believed she was still unconscious, giving her the element of surprise. "ETA to the airfield," one of the men asked. 20 minutes, Viper replied. "Chopper's standing by to extract to the main compound." Emily's heart sank. If they reached the airfield and transferred her to a helicopter, her chances of escape would plummet dramatically. She needed to act before then, despite the unfavorable odds. Carefully, she tested the zip ties binding her wrists, seeking any weakness or flexibility. They were tight, but not circulation-cutting tight. With the right leverage and technique, she might be able to break them, but it would require a distraction. As if answering her unspoken need, the vehicle's radio crackled to life. "Alpha Team report," a voice demanded. Viper reached for the radio handset. "Alpha Actual. Package secured en route to extraction point. Be advised, law enforcement has established roadblocks on all major routes. Recommend alternate pathways." "Already on it," Viper responded. "Taking County Road 27 to the cutoff." This information was valuable. They were on a secondary road, likely with limited traffic. Any escape attempt would need to capitalize on that isolation. Emily continued her careful assessment. From the sound patterns, she was positioned in the back seat with 1 guard beside her and 2 men in front, Viper driving and another in the passenger seat. The vehicle hit a pothole, jostling the occupants. Emily allowed her body to shift naturally with the movement, using it to mask her adjustment to a more advantageous position. "She's still out cold?" Viper asked from the driver's seat. The man beside her leaned over his breath, hot on her face as he checked her. "Yeah, but she's breathing steady. That was a solid hit you gave her." "Don't underestimate her," Viper warned. "This bitch took down 3 of our best men in that diner with just a chair in her bare hands." "Just like old times, huh, boss?" the passenger commented. "Remember that operation in Kosovo?" Viper's laugh held no humor. "She was on our side then, before she decided to play hero." Emily's mind raced at this new information. Kosovo. She and Viper had operated together. The pieces of her fragmented past were aligning, memories she'd deliberately suppressed, resurfacing with painful clarity. "You know what I never understood, Viper?" she said suddenly, her eyes still closed. "How someone with your record could throw it all away for drug money." The SUV swerved slightly as Viper reacted to her voice. "Well, look who's awake," he said, eyes meeting hers in the rearview mirror. Still the same smart mouth. Emily met his gaze steadily. "And you're still the same coward, Max, hiding behind better men, taking credit for their work." The guard beside her tensed hand, moving to his weapon. "Shut her up, boss." No, Viper replied, his eyes never leaving hers in the mirror. Let her talk. It's the last conversation she'll ever have. Emily maintained eye contact, buying time, as she worked her bound wrists against the seat edge behind her. The FBI knows everything, Max. Your connection to Black Talon, the weapon shipments, Robert Miller's murder. It's over. Nothing's over, Viper sneered. By tomorrow you'll be dead, and I'll be halfway to a non-extradition country with enough money to live like a king. The vehicle slowed as it approached what Emily guessed was an intersection. This would be her best opportunity, the momentary reduction in speed the driver's divided attention. She regulated her breathing, preparing for explosive action. Timing would be everything. As the SUV slowed further, Emily made her move. Her eyes snapped open. Before the guard beside her could react, she drove her head forward into his face with all the force she could muster. The crunch of cartilage and his howl of pain confirmed a broken nose. In the same fluid motion, she brought her knees to her chest and kicked out at the back of the driver's seat, sending Viper lurching forward into the steering wheel. The SUV swerved violently, tires screeching on asphalt. The passenger turned, drawing his weapon, but Emily was already in motion again, rolling her body across the back seat. She delivered a powerful kick to her guard's groin that left him doubled over and retching. Viper fought to regain control of the vehicle as it fishtailed across the road. "Shoot her," he screamed at the passenger. The man twisted further in his seat, weapon raised. Emily threw herself to the floor of the vehicle as the gun discharged the bullet, punching through the back window instead of her skull. The SUV careened off the road, crashing through underbrush as Viper struggled with the wheel. Emily used the violent motion to her advantage, driving her shoulder into her incapacitated guard and pinning him against the door. With a silent apology to her wrists, she executed the escape technique she'd practiced countless times in training. Arching her back, she drove her bound hands down and outward with all her strength, separating the zip tie through sheer force and the proper angle. The plastic cut into her skin as it broke, but she was free. The passenger fired again, the round going wide as the vehicle bounced over rough terrain. Emily seized her guard's weapon from its holster, then grabbed the handle of the rear door and threw her weight against it. The door burst open and Emily launched herself from the moving vehicle, tucking into a roll. She hit the ground. Pain exploded across her body as she tumbled down an embankment, the momentum carrying her through brambles and over rocks before she came to a stop in a shallow ditch. For a moment, she lay stunned, her breath coming in sharp gasps as she oriented herself. A quick self-assessment confirmed a gash on her forehead, bleeding freely, a severely bruised shoulder, and possibly a sprained wrist, painful but not incapacitating. Above, the SUV had skidded to a halt. Car doors slammed as her pursuers recovered from the chaos she'd created. "Find her," Viper's voice bellowed. "She can't have gone far." Emily forced herself to move, crawling deeper into the underbrush that lined the road. The night darkness was her ally now, concealing her from immediate detection. She checked the weapon she'd taken, a Glock 19 magazine nearly full. Small comfort against three armed opponents, but better than nothing. Flashlight beams cut through the darkness as Viper and his men began searching the roadside. Emily remained motionless, controlling her breathing despite the pain radiating through her body. "Spread out," Viper ordered. 10-meter intervals. "She's injured, check the blood trails." Emily assessed her options with cold pragmatism. She was outnumbered, injured, and unfamiliar with the terrain. Direct confrontation would be suicidal. Evasion was her best strategy. Avoid detection, put distance between herself and her pursuers, then circle back towards civilization. A flashlight beam swept over the brush just feet from her position. Emily held her breath, willing herself to become one with the shadows. "Got blood here," one of the men called from further down the embankment. "Fresh trail heading east." Thank God for distractions, Emily thought, as the flashlight near her position swung away to join the false lead. Someone else's blood, or animal blood, or just red-colored water, she didn't care as long as it drew them away. When the immediate area cleared, Emily began to move slowly, silently, using techniques honed through years of training. Each movement was deliberate, avoiding twigs or leaves that might create noise. She oriented herself by the stars visible through gaps in the tree canopy. If the SUV had been heading toward an airfield, moving in the opposite direction should eventually lead to a main road or town. Behind her, she could hear Viper cursing as the false trail went cold. "Spread water, she's here somewhere." Emily increased her pace, ignoring the protests of her battered body. Distance was life now. Every yard between her and her pursuers improved her odds. After what felt like hours but was likely only 20 minutes, the sounds of pursuit had faded. Emily paused in a small clearing to assess her condition and options. The head wound had mostly stopped bleeding, but dried blood matted her hair and stiffened the left side of her face. Her right wrist was definitely sprained from the landing. Every breath sent sharp pains through her rib cage, possibly cracked ribs. Despite the catalog of injuries, she allowed herself a grim smile. She was alive and armed, a significant improvement over her situation 10 minutes ago. A distant sound caught her attention, the rhythmic thump of helicopter rotors approaching from the north. The extraction helicopter, she realized. They're still planning to complete the mission. The sound presented both a threat and an opportunity. The helicopter would have infrared capabilities, making hiding far more difficult. But its arrival meant Viper and his men would likely return to the road to rendezvous with it, potentially giving her a clearer path to escape. Emily calculated rapidly. The helicopter would need a clearing to land, probably the same airfield they'd been heading toward. If she could determine its location, she might be able to circle around it and find the main road beyond. She began moving again, using the helicopter sound as a reference point, carefully maintaining her distance from it while working her way around what she assumed was its landing zone. After another 15 minutes of cautious progress, her gamble paid off through the trees. She spotted the glint of metal guardrails reflecting moonlight. A road. Emily approached carefully, aware that Viper might have left a man to watch this likely escape route. She observed from concealment for several minutes, scanning for any sign of a sentry before deciding it was clear. The road was narrow but paved, a county road rather than a main highway. In the distance to her right, she could make out the glow of lights, a town or service station perhaps a mile away. Hope flared in her chest, quickly tempered by caution. She was still deep in hostile territory with unknown numbers of enemies between her and safety. Emily stepped onto the asphalt, favoring her injured wrist as she began moving toward the distant lights. The helicopter sounds had faded, suggesting it had landed somewhere behind her. She had covered perhaps a quarter mile when headlights appeared around a bend ahead, a vehicle approaching at speed. Emily instantly dropped to the shoulder, sliding down the embankment into cover. The vehicle, a police cruiser with lights flashing, but no siren, raced past her position, heading in the direction she'd come from. Law enforcement responding to the situation at the diner, Emily guessed. But could she trust them? With Viper's connections, any approaching vehicle could be friend or foe. She pulled herself back up to the road once the cruiser passed and continued toward the lights, moving as quickly as her injuries would allow. The adrenaline that had carried her through the escape was beginning to ebb each step, becoming more painful than the last. Behind her, more vehicles passed, 2 SUVs and another police cruiser, all heading toward what she now suspected was the confrontation point where law enforcement had located the helicopter. Emily kept moving, focusing on placing one foot in front of the other. The distant lights grew gradually larger, resolving into what appeared to be a small gas station at a crossroads. Just another 100 yards, she told herself. Just a little further. The sound of an approaching vehicle caused her to tense again, but this one was coming from ahead, from the direction of the gas station. Emily prepared to take cover again, but something about the vehicle's profile as it rounded the bend made her hesitate. It was an old pickup truck, its engine rattling with age. As it drew closer, Emily made a split-second decision and stepped into the road, raising her hand to flag it down. The truck's brakes squealed as the driver spotted her. It rocked to a halt several yards away, headlights illuminating Emily's battered form. "Jesus Christ," a male voice exclaimed as the driver's door opened. An elderly man in overalls emerged, his weathered face creased with concern. "Miss, are you all right?" Emily kept the Glock partially concealed behind her leg, not yet ready to trust. "Who are you?" she demanded, her voice rougher than she intended. The old man raised his hand slightly, showing he was unarmed. "Name's Earl Pritchard. Got a farm 3 miles down this road. Was heading into town for some supplies." His eyes narrowed as he took in her condition. "You look like you've been through hell, ma'am." Emily studied him carefully, the deep lines in his face, the work-worn hands, the genuine concern in his eyes. Nothing about him suggested connection to Black Talon or the Steel Serpents. "I need help," she admitted, finally lowering the weapon slightly. "There are men after me." Earl's expression hardened as he processed this information. Without hesitation, he gestured to the passenger door. "Get in," he said firmly. "Whatever trouble you're in, we'll sort it out at the sheriff's station." Emily hesitated only a moment before climbing into the truck, wincing as her injuries protested the movement. "Thank you," she said simply. Earl turned the truck around with practiced efficiency, accelerating back toward the gas station and beyond. "Highway patrols all over the place tonight," he commented. "Something big going down. That related to your situation." Emily measured her response carefully. "Yes, I'm a federal agent. There was an incident at Crossroads Diner in Millfield." Earl's eyebrows shot up. "Miller's Place, hell. That's where I was heading and my buddy Frank called, said there was some kind of standoff." He gave her a sidelong glance. "You really a Fed?" In answer, Emily reached into her boot where she kept her backup credentials, a habit that had saved her life more than once. The waterproof case was still intact, the FBI badge and ID card within undamaged. "Special Agent Amanda Reynolds," she confirmed, showing him the identification. "I need to get back to Millfield immediately. My team is there." Earl whistled low. "Well, I'll be damned. Don't worry, Agent Reynolds. My truck ain't much to look at, but she'll get you there." As they approached a crossroads with a police checkpoint, Emily tensed again. "Stop before we reach them," she instructed. "I need to be sure they're legitimate." Earl glanced at her with newfound respect, then nodded and slowed the truck. "Trust issues, huh? Can't say I blame you." Emily peered through the windshield at the roadblock ahead. Several officers in uniform were checking vehicles, but something about their posture and equipment seemed off. "Those aren't standard-issue police jackets," she murmured, her instincts flaring. "And that's not how legitimate officers hold their weapons." Earl's face hardened. "So what's the play here, Agent?" Emily's mind raced through options. "Is there another way to Millfield? A back road?" "Sure is." Earl nodded. "Old logging road about a quarter-mile back. Rough going, but my truck can handle it." "Turn around," Emily directed. "Slowly, like you just remembered something." Nothing suspicious. Earl executed a casual three-point turn, heading back the way they'd come. In the rearview mirror, Emily watched the checkpoint shrink into the distance, relieved when no vehicles pursued them. "Damn," Earl muttered. "Fake cops. What the hell kind of mess are you and Agent Reynolds?" "The kind that gets people killed," Emily replied grimly. "I appreciate your help, but you should know the risk." Earl's weathered face broke into an unexpected smile. "Ma'am, I'm 74 years old, fought in Vietnam, survived 2 heart attacks, and 50 years of marriage to the stubbornest woman God ever created. I ain't afraid of a little excitement." Despite everything, Emily felt a smile tug at her lips. There was something comforting about Earl's matter-of-fact courage, a reminder of why she joined the FBI in the first place, to protect people like him. "Phone," she asked, her thoughts returning to her team at the diner. Earl reached into his pocket and handed her an older flip phone. "Reception's spotty out here, but you're welcome to try." Emily dialed one of the few numbers she still knew by heart. It rang 3 times before a familiar voice answered. "This is Parker." "Cass," Emily breathed. "It's me. I'm alive." A moment of stunned silence, then, "Amanda, where are you? We thought—" "I escaped during transport," Emily explained quickly. "I'm in a civilian vehicle heading back toward Millfield." "What's the situation there?" Cass's voice tightened. "It's complicated. Jack took a round to the shoulder, but he'll be okay. Davidson has a concussion from the grenade, but he's conscious. Maria took a bullet to the arm, but she's stable. The FBI tactical team arrived about 10 minutes after they took you. We've secured the diner and have 4 suspects in custody." "And Viper?" Emily asked, tension coiling in her gut. "In the wind," Cass admitted. "He wasn't among those we captured. We think he's headed for the helicopter extraction point. The Bureau has units converging on the likely location now." Emily processed this information rapidly. "Be careful. There's a fake checkpoint on County Road 18. They're posing as state police." "Copy that," Cass replied, her voice sharpening. "I'll alert the tactical team. What's your position?" Emily relayed their location as best she could determine it, then added, "Tell Jack and the others I'm coming back." "Will do," Cass replied, relief evident in her voice. And Amanda, "It's good to hear your voice." As Emily ended the call, she felt a complex mix of emotions wash over her. Relief at being alive, concern for her allies, determination to see this through to the end. After years of running and hiding, of constructing and discarding identities like worn-out clothes, she was finally facing her past head-on. Earl drove steadily through the night, the old pickup's headlights cutting a path through the darkness. "Your friend's gonna be okay," he asked, his voice gentle with concern. Emily stared ahead at the road unfolding before them. "Yes," she said with quiet certainty, "we're all going to be okay." As they crested a hill, emergency lights became visible in the distance, a gathering of legitimate law enforcement vehicles at what appeared to be the edge of Millfield. The confrontation wasn't over, but for the first time in years, Emily wasn't facing it alone. The pickup rumbled toward the lights, carrying her back to the fight she'd been avoiding for too long, and to the people who had become, in the space of a single violent day, the closest thing to family she'd known in years. The outskirts of Millfield glowed with the flashing lights of emergency vehicles, red and blue pulses cutting through the night darkness like a patriotic heartbeat. As Earl's pickup approached the roadblock, Emily tensed her hand, instinctively moving toward the Glock concealed beneath her jacket. "Easy now," Earl murmured, sensing her anxiety. "Those are real badges up ahead. See the stance, military straight, and standard issue gear, not the knockoffs your friends were wearing." Emily studied the officers with the careful assessment born from years of training. Earl was right. These were legitimate law enforcement, not black talent imposters. She allowed herself to relax marginally, though her hand remained near her weapon. A young state trooper approached as Earl rolled down his window. "Evening, sir. I'm afraid the road's closed ahead. There's an ongoing federal operation in progress." Earl nodded toward Emily. "Reckon she's part of that operation." Found her walking down County Road 18, pretty banged up. The trooper's eyes widened as he took in Emily's appearance, the dried blood on her face, the torn clothes, the unmistakable intensity of a fellow law enforcement officer. "Ma'am?" he questioned cautiously. Emily reached for her credentials with deliberate movements. "Special Agent Amanda Reynolds, FBI. I need to get through immediately." The trooper examined her badge with appropriate scrutiny before nodding sharply. "Yes, ma'am. They've been looking for you." He stepped back, gesturing to another officer. "Wilson, radio ahead, we've got Agent Reynolds." Within moments, they were waved through the checkpoint. The small-town charm of Millfield had been transformed by the presence of tactical vehicles, ambulances, and the organized chaos of a major federal operation. "Never seen anything like this in Millfield," Earl commented as he navigated carefully through the emergency vehicles. "Not even during the flood of '87. "Thank you, Earl," Emily said sincerely, her eyes scanning the scene for familiar faces, "for picking me up, for not asking too many questions." The old farmer's weathered face creased in a brief smile. "World's got too many questions and not enough help, if you ask me." He pulled up near a command vehicle. "Reckon this is your stop." Emily opened the door but paused before stepping out. "Be careful heading home. There could still be hostiles in the area." Earl patted a shotgun mounted on his dashboard rack, a vintage Remington that looked as old and reliable as its owner. "Been taking care of myself since before you were born, Agent Reynolds. But I appreciate the concern." As Emily exited the truck, a familiar figure detached from a group of federal agents and strode purposefully toward her Cass Parker rifle slung across her back, relief evident in her normally stoic expression. "Amanda," she called, breaking into an uncharacteristic jog. "Thank God." They embraced briefly, the gesture carrying the weight of years of shared danger and mutual respect. "Status report," Emily requested, as they separated, her focus immediately returning to the mission despite her injuries. "Diner secure. 4 tangos in custody, 2 KIA." Cass replied, falling into step beside Emily as they moved toward the command center. "Jack's at the hospital with a GSW to the shoulder, non-critical. Davidson has a concussion but refused transport until we finish this mess," as he put it. Maria took a round to the arm, but she's already back in the field coordinating with the tactical teams. "And Viper?" Emily asked, the name like acid on her tongue. Cass's expression hardened. "Still in the wind. We tracked the helicopter to an abandoned airfield 3 miles east, but they were gone when our teams arrived." However, her voice took on a hint of satisfaction. "We found documentation in the SUV they left behind. Coordinates for what we believe is their main compound about 60 miles north in the mountains. Joint Task Force is mobilizing now." Emily absorbed this information, her mind already formulating a plan. "I'm going with them." "Like hell you are," came a familiar growl from behind them. Emily turned to find Sheriff Davidson approaching, his uniform disheveled and stained with blood, a bandage visible beneath his gray hair. Despite his injuries, he carried himself with the same uncompromising authority he'd displayed in the diner. You look like you've been dragged behind a truck for 10 miles, he continued bluntly. You need medical attention, not another firefight. With all due respect, Sheriff, Emily began. Don't with all due respect me, young lady, Davidson cut her off. I've been policing this county since you were in diapers. You did your part. Now let the rest of us do ours. Cass suppressed a smile at the exchange. He's right, Amanda. You've been running for 5 years. You don't need to be on the assault team to finish this. Emily opened her mouth to argue further when another voice joined the conversation, calm, authoritative, and instantly recognizable. Agent Reynolds isn't going anywhere except medical evaluation. FBI Assistant Director Thomas Morgan approached his tall frame, imposing even in civilian clothes, his dark face lined with the weight of authority and recent stress. Sir, Emily acknowledged, straightening despite her injuries. I didn't expect to see you in the field. When one of my best agents resurfaces after 5 years in deep cover followed by a firefight that lights up every law enforcement channel in 3 counties, I make an exception to my desk policy, Morgan replied dryly. His expression softened marginally. It's good to see you alive, Reynolds. Emily nodded, emotion threatening to crack her professional veneer. Morgan had been her mentor, the one who had recruited her from Quantico, who had believed in her abilities when others doubted. His presence here spoke volumes about the importance of the operation and perhaps his personal concern for her welfare. The Black Talon case is finally breaking open, Morgan continued. We've got teams hitting 3 locations simultaneously based on the intelligence you gathered. Maxwell Reed isn't getting away this time. Sir, I know Viper better than anyone, Emily pressed. I should be there when they take him down. Morgan's gaze was evaluating, measuring her condition against her determination. You've been carrying this burden alone for 5 years, Reynolds. It's time to trust your team. He gestured to a nearby EMT. Get checked out, get cleaned up. Then we'll talk about your role in the final phase. It wasn't a no, which from Morgan was as good as a tentative yes. Emily recognized the wisdom in his approach even as impatience burned within her. The end was in sight, she could feel it, almost taste it. The conclusion to a mission that had cost her everything, including her identity. Yes, sir, she conceded finally. As the EMT approached with a medical kit, Emily allowed herself to be guided to an ambulance where her injuries could be properly treated. Through the open doors, she could see the tactical teams preparing checking weapons, reviewing floor plans, synchronizing communications. The machinery of justice was in motion with or without her immediate participation. Davidson settled onto the ambulance step beside her, wincing slightly as his own injuries protested the movement. Hell of a first day on the he commented as the EMT began cleaning the gash on Emily's forehead. A surprised laugh escaped her. I've been here 8 months, Sheriff. As a waitress, sure, Davidson nodded, but Emily Blackwood ceased to exist around sunset. This is Amanda Reynolds' first day back from the dead. He studied her with the shrewd assessment of a career lawman. Must be strange. The observation struck Emily with unexpected force. She had lived as Emily Blackwood for so long that the boundaries between her constructed identity and her real self had blurred. Now hearing her true name spoken openly after years of secrecy, she felt both liberated and disoriented, like stepping from a darkened room into bright sunlight. I'm not sure who I am anymore, she admitted quietly. Davidson nodded as if this made perfect sense. That's how it goes sometimes. Life has a way of making you choose between who you were, who you are, and who you need to be. He adjusted his bandage with a grimace. For what it's worth, I like both of them, Emily and Amanda. The simple acceptance in his words was oddly comforting. Before she could respond, Cass approached her, expression urgent. We've got movement at the compound, she reported. Satellite imagery shows vehicles preparing to depart. They're bugging out. Emily was on her feet, instantly ignoring the EMT's protests. They must have been tipped off. Morgan appeared behind Cass, already issuing orders into his radio. Move up the timeline. All teams execute now. He turned to Emily. How mobile are you? I'm good to go, sir, she replied without hesitation. Morgan studied her for a brief moment, then nodded. Command vehicle. Advisory capacity only. You don't set foot on that compound without my direct order. Clear, Bamano. Crystal clear, sir. Minutes later, Emily found herself in a tactical command vehicle speeding north along mountain roads, the technological hub of a complex operation unfolding in real time. Screens displayed satellite imagery, thermal readings, and the positions of tactical teams converging on the Black Talon compound. Maria sat beside her wounded arm in a sling, but her focus intense as she coordinated communications between teams. Despite her own injuries, she moved with efficient precision, her earlier warmth replaced by the cool professionalism of an operator in her element. Cass is positioning with Sniper Team 2 on the ridge overlooking the north approach. Maria reported adjusting a headset with her good hand. Tactical Alpha is 5 minutes from the west entrance. Bravo and Charlie teams are in position to cut off potential escape routes. Emily studied the compound layout displayed on the main screen, a former lumber mill repurposed into a fortified base. Multiple buildings, perimeter fencing, guard positions. A defensible position, but not impregnable. They'll have an escape tunnel, she noted, pointing to a structure near the eastern edge. Probably here through the old lumber storage area. Standard Black Talon protocol. Morgan leaned forward, keying his microphone. Team Charlie adjust position to cover the eastern quadrant. Possible escape route through the lumber storage building. Acknowledgements crackled through the speakers as the teams adapted to the new intelligence. As the command vehicle navigated the winding mountain roads, Emily felt the familiar focus of operational readiness settling over her, a clarity of purpose that had been her constant companion throughout her FBI career. The years of running, hiding, and living in the shadows fell away. In this moment, she was purely Amanda Reynolds again, an agent completing her mission. The radio channels buzzed with pre-operation communications teams confirming positions and reporting final observations. Through the tactical camera feeds, Emily could see the compound, a collection of industrial buildings nestled in a clearing surrounded by dense forest. Lights illuminated the perimeter and figures moved with urgent purpose, loading vehicles. They're definitely evacuating, Morgan observed. We need to move now or lose them. He keyed his command channel. All teams, this is Control. You are green to execute. I say again, green to execute. Priority target is Maxwell Reed, codename Viper. Capture preferred, but you are authorized to use lethal force if necessary. The response was immediate and disciplined. Alpha team copies moving in. Bravo team copies securing south perimeter. Charlie team in position at east quadrant. Sniper teams have overwatch established. Emily watched the screens with intense focus as the operation began. Thermal imagery showed the tactical teams advancing through the surrounding forest, converging on the compound from multiple directions. The element of surprise was their greatest advantage if they could maintain it until the perimeter was breached. For several tense minutes, everything proceeded according to plan. Alpha team reached the western fence undetected. Bravo established blocking positions along the southern access road. Charlie moved into position to intercept any attempts to flee eastward through the suspected escape tunnel. Then, without warning, floodlights blazed to life throughout the compound. An alarm wailed, cutting through the night. On the thermal feeds, Emily watched as the previously orderly movements within the compound transformed into a chaotic scramble. They've been compromised, Maria announced tersely. Security protocols activated. Morgan's face hardened. All teams execute immediately. I repeat, execute immediately. We've lost surprise. The operation shifted from stealth to direct assault with practiced efficiency. Alpha team breached the western fence, advancing toward the main building in tactical formation, despite now being exposed. Bravo reported engagement with armed hostiles attempting to flee in vehicles. Charlie team taking fire from the eastern building, came an urgent report. Heavy resistance at the suspected escape route. Emily's attention locked onto the eastern quadrant display. If her assessment was correct, that's where Viper would be heading, using the confusion of the main assault as cover for his own escape. Sir, she addressed Morgan. Viper will be with the eastern group. That's his extraction point. Morgan nodded, already reaching the same conclusion. Charlie team, be advised, priority target likely in your sector. Proceed with extreme caution. Reed is former Special Forces and considered extremely dangerous. The command vehicle rocked as the driver navigated the final approach to the staging area, a clearing approximately 1 mile from the compound. Through the windows, Emily could see the distant flashes of gunfire illuminating the night sky. Vehicle stopping, sir, the driver reported. Establish command post ahead. Morgan turned to Emily. We continue operations from the field command center. Remember, advisory capacity only Reynolds. Emily nodded, though every instinct screamed to join the teams in the field. As they exited the vehicle and moved toward the command tent, her training asserted itself. She would be more valuable providing tactical insight than adding one more gun to the assault. Inside the command center, a more comprehensive view of the operation unfolded across multiple displays. Body camera feeds from team leaders showed the assault from ground-level tactical operators moving through buildings, securing rooms, encountering and neutralizing resistance. Alpha Team has secured the main building, came a report. Multiple suspects in custody, no sign of Reed. Bravo Team has disabled 3 vehicles attempting to flee south, 4 tangos in custody, 2 wounded. Emily's focus remained on the Charlie Team feed, watching intently as they approached the eastern building, the lumber storage facility, where she suspected the escape tunnel was located. Charlie Team, be advised. She spoke into the communication system. There will likely be a concealed entrance, possibly beneath industrial equipment or behind false walls. The tunnel may be booby-trapped if they're using it for emergency evacuation. Copy that, came the terse acknowledgement from Charlie Team's leader. The body camera showed the team advancing cautiously through the facility, a cavernous space filled with abandoned machinery, stacked lumber, and deep shadows. Perfect terrain for ambush. Movement ahead, reported the Charlie Team leader. Northeast corner behind the sawmill equipment. The camera view shifted, focusing on a shadowy riage partially obscured by massive rusting machinery. As the tactical light illuminated the space, a figure darted between cover positions, too quick for a clean shot. That's not Viper, Emily noted, studying the movement pattern. Too small, different posture. Charlie leader, be advised, that's likely not our primary target, Morgan relayed. Proceed with caution. Reed may be using a decoy. The team advanced methodically, clearing paths between the machinery. The fleeing figure disappeared behind a large lumber sorting table, then reappeared, now holding something in their hands. Grenade, shouted a voice on the Charlie Team channel. The camera view jerked violently as operators dove for cover. The explosion rocked the feed, the camera temporarily losing signal before reconnecting to show dust and debris filling the air. Status reports confirmed no serious casualties among the team, but the diversion had served its purpose, creating chaos and obscuring visibility. Southern wall, Emily said suddenly, her eyes catching movement on a different camera angle. There's an access panel sliding open. The secondary camera feed showed it clearly, a section of wall moving aside to reveal a dark passage beyond. A figure emerged, moving with military precision, weapon at the ready. Even through the grainy feed, Emily recognized the snake tattoo coiling up his neck. Viper, she confirmed, exiting through the south wall passage. Charlie Team, redirect, Morgan ordered. Target identified at south wall tunnel exit, but the team was still recovering from the grenade blast, regrouping amidst the dust and confusion. By the time they reoriented, Viper had disappeared into the forest beyond the compound perimeter. He's outside the containment zone, Maria reported, tracking the breach on the tactical map. Heading southeast through dense cover. Morgan turned to his communications officer. Get drone surveillance over that sector immediately and alert the perimeter team's armed suspect fleeing southeast from the lumber facility. Emily studied the terrain map with growing concern. The southeastern sector was the most densely forested, with ravines and rock formations providing natural cover. If Viper reached that area, even thermal imaging would struggle to track him in the environmental clutter. He knows exactly where he's going, she said. This was his contingency plan all along. Morgan nodded grimly. Standard escape and evasion. He's got a cached vehicle or extraction point prearranged. Emily's mind raced through possibilities, drawing on her deep knowledge of both the terrain and her adversary's psychology. There's an old fire road 3 miles southeast, she noted, pointing to the map. Rarely used, doesn't appear on most maps. Perfect for a quiet extraction. Morgan immediately grasped the implication. Team Delta, redirect to these coordinates. Suspect likely heading for extraction at the old fire road. As the operation adjusted to this new development, Emily felt a familiar certainty settling over her. Viper was running true to form, always with a backup plan, always one step ahead of pursuit. But this time she understood his playbook intimately. This time she could anticipate his moves. Sir, she said, her voice low but firm. I need to join Delta Team. Morgan's refusal was immediate. Absolutely not, Reynolds. You're still injured and you're too personally involved. With respect, sir, that's exactly why I need to be there, Emily countered. I know how Reed thinks, how he moves. Delta Team is good, but they're hunting a ghost in terrain he's likely studied for months. I can narrow those odds. Morgan's expression remained impassive, but Emily could see the calculation in his eyes weighing operational protocols against tactical necessity. Before he could respond, a new voice joined the conversation. She's right. Emily turned to find Jack Miller standing at the entrance to the command center, his left arm in a sling, his weathered face pale but determined. Despite his injury, he carried himself with the same quiet strength she had observed in the diner, the bearing of a man who had faced death too many times to fear it. Mr. Miller, Morgan acknowledged with a hint of surprise. You should be in the hospital. Jack's expression didn't change. Probably. But I've got unfinished business with Maxwell Reed. He stepped fully into the command center, his eyes meeting Emily's, and so does she. This isn't about revenge, Morgan warned. No, sir, Jack agreed. It's about justice for my son, for her team in Denver, for everyone Black Talon has hurt. He turned his steady gaze to the assistant director. Sometimes the book doesn't have all the answers. Sometimes you need the people who've paid the price to finish the job. The command center fell silent as Morgan considered their words, the only sounds, the tactical communications continuing in the background. Finally, he nodded once, a sharp, decisive gesture. Delta team gets an advisor, he concluded. Reynolds, you join them at the perimeter line, but you stay behind the tactical element. Miller, you remain here. When Jack began to protest, Morgan cut him off. That's non-negotiable. One injured agent is enough of a risk. Emily nodded, understanding the concession for what it was. Thank you, sir. Don't thank me yet, Morgan replied grimly. If this goes sideways, we'll all have plenty of explaining to do at the inquiry. Within minutes, Emily was in a tactical vehicle speeding toward the southeastern perimeter, a borrowed tactical vest replacing her torn clothing, a fresh sidearm at her hip. The pain of her injuries had receded beneath the focus of the mission, a familiar compartmentalization that had served her well throughout her career. Delta Team's leader, a veteran tactical operator named Ramirez, briefed her as they approached the deployment zone. We've got thermal drones scanning the area, but the canopy is dense, and there are natural heat sources complicating the picture. If your fire road theory is correct, we can establish a blocking position, but we need to move fast. Reed will stay off obvious paths, Emily advised. He'll use natural features for navigation, creek beds, rock formations. His training will tell him to avoid ridgelines where he'd be silhouetted. Ramirez nodded, adjusting their approach accordingly. We'll deploy in a staggered advance, maintain communications discipline. You stay with rear security until we confirm contact. The vehicle stopped at the edge of the forest, the tactical team disembarking with practiced efficiency. Emily followed the cool night air, a shock against her skin after the heated intensity of the command center. The forest loomed before them, dark, dense, and unforgiving. Somewhere within its shadows, Maxwell Reed was moving toward escape, toward freedom from justice. The thought steeled Emily's resolve. Not this time. This ended tonight. Delta Team moved into the forest in tactical formation, night vision equipment, transforming the darkness into an eerie green landscape. Emily maintained her position with the rear security element as promised, though every instinct urged her forward. For 20 tense minutes, they advanced through the underbrush, following game trails and natural channels through the vegetation. Communications remained minimal, short-coded updates, confirming positions and movements. Then from the point element, thermal signature ahead, single individual moving southeast along the creek bed, approximately 500 meters. Emily keyed her microphone. Likely our target. He'll be using the water to mask his thermal signature intermittently. Copy that, Ramirez acknowledged. Moving to intercept. All elements maintain tactical spacing. The team adjusted course, closing the distance to the creek bed with careful precision. Emily felt the familiar tension of an approaching confrontation, the heightened awareness, the controlled breathing, the mental preparation for whatever might come. Visual contact, came the whispered update. Confirmed target, armed with what appears to be a compact submachine gun, moving deliberately, checking his 6 regularly. He knows he's being pursued, Emily noted, but he may not know how close we are. Ramirez made a swift decision. We'll set up a pincer. Alpha and Bravo elements move to blocking positions ahead. Charlie element maintain pursuit pressure. Reynolds stay with Delta element as reserve. The team split according to the plan, moving through the forest to establish the trap. Emily remained with Delta element, watching the tactical feed on her handheld display as the operation unfolded. The thermal signature that was Maxwell Reed continued along the creek bed, occasionally stepping into the water to confuse pursuit, but maintaining his southeastern heading. He was moving with purpose, clearly confident in his escape route. "He's approaching the intercept point," Ramirez reported. "All elements ready to execute on my mark." Emily watched the display with total focus, barely breathing, as the distance closed. The years of pursuit, the sacrifices, the lives lost, all culminating in this moment in a dark forest. "Execute, execute, execute," Ramirez ordered. On the tactical feed, Emila watched as Alpha and Bravo elements, Guirabder, converged on the creek bed from opposite sides, while Charlie maintained pressure from behind. The classic hammer and anvil, a nearly inescapable tactical trap. Nearly. As the teams closed in, Viper sensed the trap. With the instincts of a career operator, he veered suddenly from his path, charging up a steep embankment away from the creek bed, firing a burst from his weapon to cover his movement. "Contact taking fire," Alpha element reported. "Target changing direction, moving west up the ridge." "He's breaking containment," Ramirez realized. Delta moved to intercept along the ridgeline. Emily's element surged forward, no longer in reserve, but now actively engaging in the pursuit. The carefully planned trap had failed, transforming the operation into a direct chase through difficult terrain. As they moved rapidly through the forest, Emily's tactical awareness mapped their position relative to the surrounding geography. If Reed continued west along the ridge, he would eventually reach a steep decline leading back toward the compound, a dead end. He would know this. "He's going to double back," she predicted, keying her microphone. "There's a ravine approximately 300 meters northwest of your position, Ramirez. Natural drainage channel. He'll use it to circle around behind us." "Copy that," Ramirez acknowledged. "Delta, adjust course to northwest. All other elements maintain current pursuit to keep pressure on target." Emily's group changed direction, moving through the forest at an angle to intercept the ravine she had identified. The terrain grew steeper, more challenging roots and rocks threatening to trip unwary feet in the darkness. Through her earpiece, she heard the continuing updates as Alpha Bravo and Charlie elements maintained pursuit of Viper's western movement. He was staying just ahead of them, using terrain and suppressive fire to keep them at bay without fully engaging. "Lost visual," reported Alpha element. "He dropped below the ridgeline." Emily checked her position. Delta element was approaching the ravine, but they were still minutes away from establishing an effective blocking position. "All elements be advised," she said into her microphone. "Target is likely moving toward the ravine system northwest of your position. Proceed with extreme caution. He may set an ambush at natural choke points." The warning was acknowledged by all teams. The pursuit continued now, more cautious, as the tactical operators recognized the changing dynamics of the engagement. As Delta element reached the edge of the ravine, a steep-sided channel cut by centuries of water flow, Emily studied the terrain with professional assessment. Multiple access points, heavy vegetation for concealment, unstable footing. A dangerous environment for tactical operations, but perfect for an experienced operator attempting to evade capture. "We need to establish observation points before entering the ravine," she advised Ramirez. "Reed will use the terrain against us if we follow directly." Ramirez nodded, already reaching the same conclusion. "Jensen Roberts set up overwatch on the north rim. The rest of us will deploy along the south edge at 20-meter intervals. Reynolds, stay with me at the command position." The team dispersed according to the plan, establishing a perimeter around the most likely area where Viper would emerge from the ravine. Emily remained with Ramirez at a position offering good visibility of both the ravine and the surrounding forest. For long minutes, silence reigned. The pursuit teams reported no visual contact as they carefully approached the ravine from the east. The overhead drones showed only the dense heat signatures of the forest canopy, the ravine itself a cooler void in the thermal imagery. "He's gone to ground," Ramirez concluded, using the ravine's cooler temperature to mask his signature. Emily nodded her mind, working through Viper's likely calculations. "He's waiting for us to commit to the ravine search. Once our teams are down in that channel, their mobility and communication will be compromised. So we don't give him what he wants," Ramirez decided. "We maintain the perimeter and force him to move eventually." It was the correct tactical decision, but Emily felt a growing unease. Maxwell Reed was too experienced, too cunning to be trapped so easily. He would have a contingency plan, he always did. Her eyes scanned the surrounding forest, seeking any anomaly, any hint of what he might be planning. The darkness revealed nothing, the trees standing as silent sentinels around the ravine's edge. Then a soft click in her earpiece, the channel opening, but no voice coming through. A moment later, it happened again. Not static or interference, but someone keying a microphone without speaking. "Check communications," she said urgently to Ramirez. "I think someone's tapping the channel." Ramirez frowned, touching his own earpiece. "All elements, radio check over." The responses came in sequence: Alpha clear, Bravo clear, Charlie clear. A pause, then Jensen here, clear. Another pause. Roberts clear. Ramirez relaxed slightly. All accounted for. Might have been interference from the ridge. Emily wasn't convinced. Something felt wrong, the tactical instinct that had kept her alive through countless operations warning her of danger. "When did Roberts last report his position?" she asked suddenly. Ramirez checked his tactical display. 17 minutes ago, North Rim Overwatch as ordered. And his last visual confirmation by another team member. The question caused Ramirez to stiffen, immediately grasping her concern. Jensen had eyes on him when they deployed, but they took separate observation points. Emily's alarm escalated. "We need visual confirmation on Roberts now." Ramirez keyed his microphone. "Jensen, do you have eyes on Roberts' position?" "Negative," came the response. "We're at separate points about 30 meters apart. No line of sight between positions." "Roberts, report status and confirm position," Ramirez ordered. A brief pause, then, "Roberts here, all clear at my position, no sign of target." The response seemed normal enough, but Emily caught the slight delay, the microsecond hesitation that wouldn't be noticeable to anyone who hadn't spent years attuned to the rhythms of tactical communication. "That's not Roberts," she whispered to Ramirez. "The cadence is wrong." Ramirez's expression hardened as he processed this information. If she was right, it meant Viper had neutralized Roberts and taken his communications equipment, giving him full access to their tactical channel and positioning. "All elements switched to backup frequency," Alpha, Ramirez ordered. "Possible communications compromise. Jensen, withdraw from your position immediately and rendezvous at Rally Point 1. As the team acknowledged and began switching channels, Emily's focus remained on the forest around them. If Viper had Robert's equipment, he knew their positions, their plans. The hunter had become the hunted. "We need to move," she urged Ramirez. "Now." Before he could respond, the night erupted in gunfire, not from the ravine, as expected, but from the forest directly behind their position. Bullets tore through foliage and splintered tree trunks as Ramirez and Emily dove for cover. "Taking fire from the southwest," Ramirez reported on the new channel. "Target has flanked our position." Emily rolled behind a fallen log, drawing her weapon as she sought the source of the attack. Through the muzzle flashes, she caught glimpses of movement, a figure darting between trees using the forest's natural cover for concealment. The tactical teams responded immediately, converging on the new threat location. But Viper was already moving again, firing short, controlled bursts before shifting position, the classic shoot-and-move tactics of a special forces operator. "He's drawing us into a dispersed pursuit," Emily realized, "splitting our containment." Ramirez nodded grimly. "All elements maintain discipline. Do not pursue individually. Converge on Sector 4 and re-establish perimeter." The team acknowledged adjusting to the new tactical reality, but the damage had been done. Their carefully established containment had been broken. The initiative seized by their target. As the Delta element regrouped, a new sound cut through the chaos, the distant but unmistakable whump, whump, whump of helicopter rotors approaching from the east. "Control, we have aircraft inbound," Ramirez reported, requesting confirmation of friendly air assets. Morgan's voice came through the channel. "Negative Delta. No friendly air support dispatched to your location." The implication was clear: Viper's extraction had arrived. The firefight hadn't been a last stand, but a delaying action to keep them occupied until his escape vehicle arrived. "All elements converge on the eastern ridge," Ramirez ordered. "Target is moving toward aerial extraction." The tactical teams adjusted again, now racing toward the sound of the approaching helicopter. Emily moved with them, ignoring the renewed pain from her injuries as adrenaline drove her forward. Through breaks in the canopy, she caught glimpses of a black helicopter approaching, no running lights, no markings. A private extraction, likely hired or coerced by Black Talon's remaining network. "He'll head for high ground," she called to Ramirez as they ran. The ridge clearing, half a kilometer east. Ramirez nodded, relaying the information to the scattered teams. They adjusted course accordingly, converging on the likely extraction point. As they approached the ridge, the sound of the helicopter grew louder now, directly overhead, circling as it prepared to land. Through the trees, Emily could see the clearing ahead, illuminated by the aircraft's searchlight as it sought a landing zone. Visual on the clearing, reported Alpha Element. Helicopter attempting to land. No sign of target yet. Establish perimeters, Ramirez ordered. All elements hold position at tree line. Do not approach the aircraft until target is confirmed. The teams took up positions around the clearing, weapons trained on the open space in the surrounding forest edge. The helicopter hovered 15 feet above the ground, its downdraft creating a vortex of dust and debris in the searchlight's beam. Emily positioned herself behind a massive oak at the clearing's edge, her weapon ready, her eyes scanning continuously for any sign of movement. The helicopter would only risk exposure for a few critical minutes. Viper would have to make his move soon. Movement southeast corner, Jensen reported suddenly. Target approaching the clearing. Emily shifted her focus to the indicated area. Through the swirling dust, she caught glimpses of a figure moving deliberately toward the helicopter, Maxwell Reed weapon held at the ready, head swiveling as he assessed potential threats. All elements hold, Ramirez instructed. Let him commit to the open ground. The tactical discipline was perfect. No premature shots, no movement to alert the target. Viper continued toward the helicopter, now lowering a rope ladder as it maintained its hover. On my mark, Ramirez said as Reed reached the edge of the clearing. 3-2. Before he could finish the countdown, a single shot cracked through the night, distinct from the tactical team's weapons. Viper staggered, clutching his leg, then dove for cover as the tactical teams opened fire in response to the unexpected shot. Who fired? Ramirez demanded. Report. Wasn't us, the element leaders responded in sequence. Emily's mind raced through possibilities, then settled on the most likely explanation. Sniper team, she said. Has to be Cass. As if confirming her assessment, a second precision shot struck the helicopter's tail rotor, sending the aircraft into a violent spin. The pilot fought for control, abandoning the extraction attempt as the helicopter veered away from the clearing, trailing smoke as it disappeared over the ridge. Viper, now wounded and abandoned by his extraction, returned fire wildly toward the tree line, bullets cutting through branches and kicking up dirt as the tactical teams maintained their cover. Target is contained but still dangerous, Ramirez reported. All elements maintain position. Emily studied the situation with tactical clarity. Reed was pinned down in the clearing, wounded but still armed. The helicopter had abandoned him. He had nowhere to go, but he wouldn't surrender easily. He'll make a final stand, she predicted, or try to take someone with him. Ramirez nodded grimly. Standard procedure would be to wait him out or use tear gas to force surrender. Emily considered this, then made a decision that contradicted all tactical protocols but felt inexplicably right. Let me talk to him. Ramirez stared at her. Absolutely not. He's armed and desperate. He's also wounded and knows he's finished, Emily countered. I know him, Ramirez. I know how he thinks. Let me try to end this without more bloodshed. The tactical leader hesitated, clearly torn between procedure and pragmatism. Finally, he keyed his communications. Control advisor requesting direct negotiation with target, awaiting your guidance. Morgan's response was immediate and predictable. Negative. Maintain containment and proceed with standard surrender protocols. Emily met Ramirez's eyes. It's my call, sir, she said quietly. If it goes wrong, the responsibility is mine alone. Something in her expression must have convinced him. Without responding to Morgan, he nodded once. We'll cover you. First sign of hostile action, we take him down, non-negotiable. Understood, Emily agreed. She secured her weapon, then slowly stood from cover, hands visible at her sides. Maxwell, she called clearly. It's Amanda. We need to talk. The clearing fell silent, gunfire ceasing as both sides processed this unexpected development. For a long moment, nothing moved. Then Viper's voice came from behind a fallen log at the clearing center. Come to finish the job yourself, Amanda. His tone was strained, likely from the pain of his wound, but still carried that distinctive arrogance. How personal of you. It's over, Max, she replied, stepping carefully into the open ground. The compound is secured. Your organization is dismantled. That helicopter isn't coming back. A harsh laugh answered her. Nothing's ever really over. You should know that better than anyone. Emily continued her careful approach, stopping about 15 meters from his position, close enough for meaningful conversation, far enough to give the tactical teams a clear shot if needed. You're bleeding out, she observed. Femoral artery from the look of your position. You've got maybe 20 minutes without medical attention. Then we both die here, he responded. Poetic, don't you think? Emily shook her head, though he couldn't see the gesture from his position. No one else needs to die tonight, Max. Not even you. For several heartbeats, silence hung between them. Then why'd you do it, Amanda? We were making a difference in our own way, working outside the bureaucracy, getting things done. You were selling weapons to drug cartels, she replied evenly, betraying everything the uniform stands for, killing anyone who got in your way, including Robert Miller. At the mention of Jack's son, Viper's tone hardened. Collateral damage. He should have minded his own business. Like Kosovo. Was that collateral damage too? Emily pressed piecing together the fragments of memory that had surfaced during her captivity. The village that wasn't supposed to be targeted. The civilians who died because you changed the coordinates to cover a weapons transfer. Silence answered her, confirming the long-buried truth. Their history went back further than the Black Talon investigation to a covert operation gone wrong, a cover-up she had unwittingly participated in before joining the FBI. You remember now, Viper said finally. I wondered if you'd blocked it out, or if you were just playing dumb all these years. I remember enough, Emily acknowledged, enough to know this ends tonight one way or another. Movement behind the log, Viper shifting position, perhaps trying to stem the blood flow from his wound. So what's your play here, Amanda? Talk me into surrender, appeal to my better nature. His laugh was bitter, little late for that. Emily took another careful step forward. I'm offering you a choice, Max. Medical attention and a chance to tell your side in court, or bleed out alone in these woods. Those are your options now. For a long moment, only the sounds of the forest filled the clearing, the rustle of leaves in the night breeze, the distant calls of nocturnal wildlife, the soft creak of tactical gear as the teams maintained their positions. Then Maxwell Reed rose slowly from behind the log, his weapon held loosely at his side. Blood darkened his pants leg, the wound clearly serious but not immediately fatal. His face was pale in the moonlight, the snake tattoo stark against his skin. You always were persuasive, he said, swaying slightly from blood loss. Fine. Court it is. I've got enough secrets to bargain with. Drop the weapon first, Emily instructed calmly. Viper looked down at the gun in his hand as if considering one final futile act of defiance. Then with a sigh that seemed to carry the weight of his surrender, he let it fall to the ground. Weapon down, Ramirez reported. Alpha team move in and secure the target. As the tactical operators emerged from the tree line, approaching with weapons trained on Reed, Emily maintained her position. Their eyes remained locked in a silent communication that transcended words. Recognition of a chapter, closing a mission, finally complete. The Alpha team reached Viper, securing his hands and immediately applying medical attention to his wound. As they worked, he kept his gaze on Emily. You know this isn't really the end, he said as they prepared to move him. People like us, we don't get endings, just new missions. Emily watched as they lifted him onto a tactical stretcher. That's where you're wrong, Max, she replied. My mission is complete. As they carried him toward the extraction point, Emily remained in the clearing, the tension of years gradually releasing from her shoulders. Around her, the tactical team secured the area, established a landing zone for medical evacuation coordinated with the command center. Ramirez approached his expression, a mixture of professional respect and concern. Control wants a word, he said, offering his communications headset. Emily accepted it, placing it over her ear. Reynolds here? Morgan's voice came through clearly. That was either the bravest or most foolhardy thing I've ever witnessed, Agent Reynolds. A pause then, well done. Thank you, sir, she replied, surprised by the unexpected praise. Medical evac is inbound for Reed and the rest of the wounded, Morgan continued. The compound operation is complete, 27 suspects in custody, including several high-value targets from our most wanted list. The Black Talon network is effectively dismantled. Emily absorbed this information, the culmination of years of work, sacrifice, and hardship. And the team from the diner, Jack Miller. All stable, Morgan assured her. Miller refused to stay in the command center, by the way. Last I saw, he was heading toward your position with a determined look I wouldn't want to argue with. As if summoned by the mention, Emily spotted a figure emerging from the forest edge. Jack Miller, his arms still in a sling, but his stride purposeful as he approached the clearing. Behind him, moving with the fluid grace of a predator, came Cass Parker, a sniper rifle slung across her back. Seems I have visitors, Emily noted to Morgan. Permission to disconnect, sir. Granted, Morgan replied. Report to the command center when you're shitty. We have debriefings to commence, and a lot of paperwork in your future Reynolds. Emily removed the headset, handing it back to Ramirez with a nod of thanks. As Jack and Cass approached, she moved to meet them at the clearing's edge. I thought you were supposed to stay at the command center, she said to Jack, unable to keep a hint of warmth from her voice. Never was good at following orders I disagreed with, he replied, his weathered face showing the strain of his injury, but his eyes clear and focused. Figured I deserved to see this through. Cass stepped forward, her normally stoic expression softened by the satisfaction of a completed mission. Nice negotiation technique, though I had him in my sights the whole time if it went sideways. That first shot was yours, Emily asked. A small smile touched Cass's lips. Leg wound, clean through, missed the artery by design. Figured it might make him more amenable to conversation. And the helicopter. That was me too, Cass admitted. Tail rotor's a helicopter's weakness. Disabled but not catastrophic, they'll have made an emergency landing a few miles from here. State police are already en route to the likely locations. Emily nodded, appreciating the tactical precision that had always been Cass's hallmark. Her attention returned to Jack, who was staring at the blood-stained ground where Viper had been secured. He'll stand trial, she told him quietly, for everything including Robert's death. Jack's expression remained unreadable, decades of controlled emotion evident in the tight lines around his eyes. Justice, not revenge, he said, finally echoing his earlier words to Morgan. It's what Robert would have wanted. As they stood together at the edge of the clearing, the distant sound of an approaching medical helicopter broke the night's stillness. Emily felt a profound sense of completion washing over her, not just for the mission, but for the journey that had brought her to this moment. What happens now? Jack asked, his question encompassing far more than just the immediate future. Emily looked at the stars visible through the canopy opening, then back to the man who had become an unexpected ally and friend in the space of a single violent day. Now, she said simply, we go home. The word felt strange on her lips, unfamiliar, after years of running, hiding, and living as someone else. Yet as she spoke, Emily realized it was no longer just a concept, but a tangible possibility. The diner, the small town of Millfield, the people who had stood with her when it mattered most. Perhaps that was home now. Not the place she had left behind years ago, but the one she had found when she wasn't looking for it. As the helicopter searchlight swept across the clearing, illuminating the three figures standing at its edge, Emily Blackwood, Amanda Reynolds, allowed herself to feel something she had almost forgotten existed. Hope. 2 weeks later, sunlight streamed through the windows of Crossroads Diner, catching on the freshly polished chrome fixtures. The bullet holes had been patched, the broken windows replaced, the old jukebox repaired. Life in Millfield continued. Jack Miller stood behind the counter, his arm no longer in a sling but moving with the careful deliberation of healing. The regular customers had returned, their conversations now sprinkled with reverent retellings of that night, each version growing slightly more dramatic with each passing day. In a corner booth, Sheriff Davison shared coffee with his newly arrived replacement, passing along the wisdom that comes from 32 years wearing a badge in a town where everyone knows your name. Amanda's apron hung behind the counter, framed alongside a photograph of Lieutenant Robert Miller. Not a memorial now, but a testament to justice finally served. Some battles leave visible scars. Others change you in ways only you can feel. But the hardest battles are often fought not by soldiers or agents, but by ordinary people who refuse to look away when darkness arrives at their door. For some, heroism is a single moment of courage. For others, it's the quiet dignity of continuing on day after day, pouring coffee and keeping watch. What would you risk to protect your home